Welcome everyone to the supercut of Fake It Till You Make It. I'm so excited for this. It's been almost half a year since the last part of the series premiered. Usually I would do this at the 1 year anniversary of a series, but I've been getting some requests to make this a supercut, and also we are now at a surprising 440 videos on this channel. So I thought making supercuts would help a little bit organize these things and for you to find a series you like easier and just be able to watch through all of it. Now I hope you will enjoy this. Tell me at the end of it which part of this series was your favorite and if you have a favorite quote. And now, let's go. And of course, as with all supercuts, we will get bonus material. Woo! At the end there will be a little bonus part, well, little over 20 minutes, for this series. Enjoy! What do you want, Motoya? I'm at practice. Sakusa grumbled the words while pressing the door to the locker rooms open with his shoulder, since his hands were occupied with his bag and phone, as well as a water bottle he intended to drink from when his cousin called. Apparently, early in the morning, when both of them had their occupations, was the best time for a little chat. No, you're on your way to practice. Subtle but important difference. Not really. I'm already here, and late. Mia won't let me live this down the whole day. A small chuckle echoed from the other end of the line. I know, but you still gotta change, so just put me on speaker. I have to talk to you. Sakusa rolled his eyes, but obliged. His cousin for sure could be annoying, but if he said there was something to talk about, he trusted him that it wouldn't be something trivial. You're lucky that you caught me the one day I'm late. If the others were here, I wouldn't. If by day you mean week, then sure. You're not as unpredictable as you think you. Whenever you're stressed, you over-organize stuff until you're so far in the future that you forgot the present. Happens every year when family events roll around. Sakusa scowled at his phone as he pulled the shirt over his head. Which, by the way, is exactly what I wanted to talk about. There is nothing to talk about. I'm not going. You will. Why? So that my parents can pretend they have forgotten my coming out yet again and play matchmaker? Setting me up with one of the daughters from mom's friends? Again? I'm not saying you're not justified in not going. I'm just saying you won't. Despite everything I ever tell you, you can't seem to cut ties with them. If you haven't noticed, they hold my inheritance and any financial support over my head like a guillotine, ready to be cut off anytime. If volleyball doesn't. But it will. Honestly, Kyo, you're doing so well for yourself. Again, silence. He went to the sink to fill his bottle just to have an excuse to finish the conversation before attending the very job he was putting in jeopardy over this. Doesn't matter. We won't get anywhere like this. I just wanted to say that maybe I have a solution for the matchmaking. I know you hate it. He did. He really did, but any attempt to stop it was a fight against the tide. The flood would come regardless. He lied about having a boyfriend, it continued. He lied about having a girlfriend, they wanted proof. He had an actual boyfriend who broke up with him because he couldn't endure his parents' antics anymore. They tried setting him up on dates in front of his boyfriend. To say he was tempted by Motoya's suggestion was an understatement. I'll take your silence for curiosity. So, why didn't you get yourself a date? And here he had gotten his hopes up. You know how that went the last time. The pain was far from fresh anymore, but he was still upset. It wasn't like he had been the love of his life, but he was nice and certainly didn't deserve to be treated like garbage. And worst of all, Saku's had already a really hard time to find someone he considered genuinely romantically attractive, from which point most were scared off by his odd nature, and now the rest were chased away by his family. Great. No, that's not what I meant. Nothing serious, just a fling. Or it could even be fake. Get someone who can put up with these idiots and warn them. If you want your peace of mind, ask a woman. If you want to piss off your parents, find a good partner in crime. Personally, that's my favorite option. You're clearly overestimating my social skills. How many friends do you think I have who I could ask something like that? Okay, so I see. The fling isn't an option. I won't toy with anyone's emotions like that. It's not toying with someone's emotions if the intention is clear from the get-go and both agree. He knew that. After all, he had several flings throughout his high school years and shortly after, some just to spite his parents. It was a lame excuse because, quite frankly, after a few rebounds, just casual stuff, nothing serious, following his previous relationship his parents had ruined, he felt no desire to get involved with anyone for a while. As to who, what about Mia? If he manages to tick you off so efficiently, your parents should be a piece of cake. We are not friends. I'll admit the amount of sexual tension between the two of you is a bit uncommon for platonic relationships, but I won't judge. And hey, I think you're on a pretty good way. His jaw clenched and he felt a distinct desire to reach through the phone and throw something at his cousin. I have to go to practice now. Think about it, you could... He hung up. He placed the phone in his bag and took his water bottle and quickly hurried out to the others, bowing to the coach an apology before joining them. Mian acknowledged his lateness with a slight nod, earning protest from Atsumu that he would always get scolded when he was too late, which admittedly didn't happen as often as expected. He truly loved his job. But still, on average, no one could compare it to Sakusa in being on time. To make up for it, Sakusa ran a couple of extra laps around the gym after training, unprompted but earning a nod of approval from Coach Foster. As such, he was last when entering the locker rooms again, catching a few snippets of a very interesting conversation. I'm telling you, Bo, there is something between Ami-san and Sumu-san. I'd bet on it. No way. Tsum for sure would have told us if that were the case. Don't you see how they look at each other sometimes? At each other? He didn't think he glanced at the blonde any longer than necessary in-game and on the court. I'm kinda with Bokuto on this one. Atsumu is such a show-off. He wouldn't have shut up about it if... If what? You know it's not nice to talk about people behind their back. Apparently he had just left the showers while the others were already changing into normal clothes again. Is there something between you and our favorite germaphobe? Who? Ami? Nah. But I'm sure he likes me. He said it with his typical confidence and Sakusa rolled his eyes, though he was sure Atsumu didn't mean it in a romantic way. As friends? Or... Of course as friends. I'm not even sure he likes men. Dude, you're blind. Thomas laughed and Sakusa heard a rustling as he shouldered his bag. Yeah, though I think you'd be too annoying for him, Tsumu. Friends or not. Huh? Who do you call annoying? I bet he likes me. Sure, let's say $10. You're on. From the corner, he heard the not-so-quiet mumbling of Bogota and Hinata making their own bets about whether they'd end up together. Sakusa leaned against the wall of the locker separating them, contemplating his options. Maybe, just maybe, Motoya wasn't so wrong. And now he had something he could offer Atsumu in return. His pride. He was fairly certain Mia would do a fair deal for that. He walked in, knowing that waiting any longer would come off as weird, if it wasn't already, and went straight to the showers. He knew he would have the chance to catch Atsumu afterwards before he left. He was always the last one to leave, while Sakusa was usually the first. The only reason he noticed were days like these, when he was late in the morning. True to his expectations, once he returned, Atsumu was still there, slowly dressing himself. I heard about the bet. He said it as nonchalantly as possible, while putting the towel aside and putting on his neatly folded clothes. Atsumu flinched and made an unintelligent noise of being caught. I'm sorry, Ami. It was just a silly little... If you prefer, I'll cancel it. Not that there is much use to it now, anyway. He watched him struggle and waited until the blabbering subsided. Not necessary. The blonde looked up surprised. I actually wanted to suggest a deal that might be beneficial for the both of us. Atsumu's eyes narrowed in suspicion, and Sakusa had the slight hunch that he didn't want to know what was going on in his head at that very moment, so he quickly resumed talking. My parents plan a family get-together for this weekend. They are quite conservative and always try to match me with some random girl, so Motoya suggested I'd bring a date to stop them. And preferably annoy them a bit. Since I know no one more annoying than you. Atsumu raised his brows before his typical smug smirk spread on his cheeks that made him look somewhere between punch and kissable. So, yeah, want me to be a date, Ami? Fake date. He was quick to clarify. Sure, right, because you don't actually like men. I like men, just not you. Atsumu's eyes grew round in surprise, so much that he almost forgot to be offended by the last part. He pouted. And what do I get from that? I don't particularly fancy ya taking jabs at me for the whole weekend. I don't really have a thing for humiliation. Sakusa almost choked and struggled to keep his composure. Deep breaths. This was exactly why he was perfect for this. You can be your full-on annoying self the whole weekend. Flirt with me as aggressively as you like with no holding back and piss off some conservative assholes in the process. I know that is one of your favorite hobbies. Atsumu grinned wildly, almost feral, and Sakusa just knew he'd be in for a wild ride if the blonde agreed. Letting him run free was a dangerous calculation for Kiyomi's dignity, and he just hoped he would get to enjoy his parents' sour expressions without getting too flustered. And you win the bet. The clear, joyous laugh of the setter echoed through the room and from the walls as he held his sides. Yeah, got a deal, darling. Save the pet names for the weekend. He quickly rushed out before Atsumu could see the blush blossoming on his cheeks, praying to the gods that he'd survive this one. The morning of the departure, Atsumu walked over to his apartment to meet him there and make up a story. The Spike was already anxiously waiting, finding himself hoping that he wouldn't come equally as much as he awaited his arrival. This was a stupid idea. A stupid idea and a stupid plan. The knock on the door startled him, and he was quick to open, failing to compose himself beforehand in his haste. He was greeted with the admittedly very good-looking blonde, who wore a comfortable yet stylish outfit that fit him better than expected. Did he always look this good? And Sakusa had just failed to pay attention until now, or did he dress provocatively on purpose? Ami? What? I said good morning. You look a mess. Sakusa's expression darkened. He did. He knew he did. Despite getting up early, he got little to no preparation done except for showering twice and packing most of his stuff, from which 3/4 had already been packed for a week. Still. Hey, it looks cute. I usually only see you in training clothes or some uptight suit for formal events. I didn't think you own anything else like sweatpants. I like it. Save the compliments for later. No flirting yet. Atsumu smirked and leaned closer intentionally. Oh, you will know when I start flirting. Sakusa met his teasing gaze with an ice-cold stare, not giving him the satisfaction of any kind of reaction, yet he dreaded what was about to come. If this was just Mia teasing, he didn't really want to know what his flirting would be like. Guess he would find out regardless. So, what's the story? How long have we been together? Any plans for the future? Perhaps moving in together once we're financially stable enough to afford a bigger apartment and... The dark-haired sighed and turned around to make them coffee. I doubt that it'll be necessary. If my parents acknowledge you at all, then as a hindrance. They won't ask too many details about us, but... But? Nasada leaned over the counter, watching him intrigued. They will try and nitpick everything about you. Make you look bad in front of me to convince me that you are not a good choice. Which won't matter because this is all fake and you don't like me anyways because I'm annoying. Gotcha. Yes. Something about the way he said it annoyed him immensely. Not because he was annoying, even though he always claimed that, and more often than not, it wasn't far from the truth. Perhaps it was Atsumu's willingness to immediately assume the label, putting himself down in the process. Maybe we shouldn't do this. It's not too late yet to back out. What? Why? He seemed almost shocked, or maybe even offended, like Sakusa had betrayed him. They will lay into you. It isn't worth it. I can lie about having a partner. I did that before. Not very successfully. I mean, that's nonsense. I can handle some idiots. You shouldn't have to. I will still say I like you, so don't be worried about the bet. I'm not. How shallow do you take me for? He didn't reply and just stared down at his cup. Something about his words made the image of him being verbally harassed by his parents so much more unbearable. He suddenly couldn't imagine him there anymore. Atsumu, kind-hearted as he was, didn't fit into that cold house. Ame, it's fine. This is gonna make it easier for you, right? He thought about it, and almost surprised himself when he found, yes, it would. There was the added level of showing his sexuality off undeniably to his family, but that wasn't it. Atsumu was warm, and one of the few who, against his expectations, respected his boundaries almost immediately without asking further questions. Something even his family didn't manage, except for Komori, that is. He nodded slowly, handing Atsumu the cup and nibbling at his own. See? There you have it. I'll help you. Look at it like a favor between friends. Friends. He thought that maybe he'd like that. It sounded nice. So, what do I gotta know? They went over a few general rules and details. Atsumu already knew that Sakusa had problems with touch and was, as such, very surprised when the doctor did not in fact suppose the idea of kisses. Public ones, obviously. For show. Stunned, he looked at him before his brows furrowed slightly. Are you familiar with the color system? Like green, yellow, and red. Sakusa's cheeks flushed bright red, and he was quick to cut him off. I don't think we'll need that. No. Hear me out. Nosada's own cheeks were dusted in a light shade of pink. I just thought, with your parents being fairly conservative and all, they probably don't know it. Definitely not. Right. Exactly. So we could use it to communicate without them noticing the whole ordeal or suspecting anything. If I ever go too far or am barely walking the line, just subtly mention yellow and I'll tone it down. I doubt that'll be the case. You are perfect as you are. For this. He quickly added the second part as he noticed how weird that sounded. Atsumu chuckled nervously. Thanks. I'd still feel more comfortable if we had something like this, just in case. Sakusa nodded slowly. Now that he mentioned it, he would also feel safer if he had a bit more control over this instead of walking in blindsided. Okay. Do you have anything, a word you could say if it gets too much? He frowned. I mean, not if I get too much. We have the colors for that. But if you want me to get you out of a situation or something. Sakusa thought about it. He was tempted to say volleyball as a first association he and Atsumu shared, but that would be said way too often. If I want you to get me out, I'll start talking about Ushijima. What? Atsumu looked so confused it was almost comical. My family knows close to nothing about me or my social life. They won't notice anything amiss. The only one who might is Komori. He knows not to touch on the topic. Did something happen between the two of you? Sakusa raised an eyebrow before averting his gaze. Not really. Atsumu sensed that it wasn't his place to ask and moved on to a lighter topic. Anyways, I got us something. To make the whole thing convincing and because I wanted to see the look on your family's face. He reached for the suspiciously heavy bag and Sakusa tried guessing what the blonde came up with. He should have known that it was impossible to try to understand Mia's thought process. Atsumu pulled two matching rainbow-colored pajamas from his bag with a tiny embroidered unicorn on the left side of the chest. Sakusa stared at them, torn between shock and horror. If we wear these, my mother might just get a heart attack and die. Atsumu laughed and put them back again. Just wait for the outfits I've packed. Sakusa knew then and there that yes, this was a calculated risk. And he was very bad at math. They got ready around early noon. It surprised Atsumu since the location Sakusa had given him was a fair distance away and he knew that if it could be avoided, the spiker hated being late. This time, however, he seemed to almost purposefully stall. He sighed, observing Sakusa as he got increasingly more nervous and on edge. Well, I best get ready so that we can leave whenever. The ace barely acknowledged him and just hummed. He couldn't tell whether he had actually heard him or not, and simply ventured out to find the bathroom, his bag in hand. Atsumu was by no means an expert in style and fashion, but he did take a mild interest in trying various things to wear. For this trip, he had a plan. Every day he'd wear something a little bit more outrageous in the eyes of someone with an old-fashioned mindset. Starting with something basic and classic, but with a modern touch and the potential to become a thirst trap if he had posted a photo on his Instagram. He put on black pants that were made from a light, airy fabric with big but subtle pockets floating just the right amount of loosely around his legs. They got wider toward the bottom, adding a slight flamboyant touch. Nothing too provocative. The trick of this outfit was the sweater. It was a black turtleneck and a very tight fit. It was something Sakusa would wear sometimes as well, just that his weren't meant to show as much of his figure as Atsumu's did. The likeness was intentional to present them as a couple from the very start, a milder version of the pajama in a way. To top it all off, he added the kind of accessories he saved for photo shoots and to show off. Flashy earrings that were simple in design but not nearly as subtle as simple rings. And certainly, he would be doomed if he had only one piercing per ear. Nasada grinned to himself as he looked at his reflection. He wore fidget rings on both hands and with a few quick movements added a subtle straight black eyeliner to the final picture. Perfect. He was fairly pleased with himself and grinned from ear to ear, knowing that this was just the beginning. Truth was, Omi was right. Pissing off conservative assholes was one of his favorite hobbies. He probably would have done him the favor even without anything in return. Yet he couldn't let him win so easily. Furthermore, he had the feeling that Ami preferred it this way, if their relationship was purely transactional for the time being. Atsumu didn't know how to feel about that. Personally, he thought the deal was perfect. To him, Sakusa was a friend, a very attractive one at that, so flirting with him for the sake of annoying his family wouldn't pose a problem at all, but he was worried how Sakusa truly felt about this. He bit his lip, chewing on it and forgetting that he had the fidget rings to avoid such behavior. Sakusa often felt uncomfortable around others, and Atsumu wasn't exactly known to be easy company. That much was sure. He sighed again, shouldered his bag, and went to see if Sakusa was ready to go. The dark eyes zeroed in on him as soon as he set foot into the living room again. His expression shifted from shocked to a scowl that Atsumu couldn't quite read. What, jealous that I look absolutely stunning? He teased him with his usual charm and, as usual, got no decent reply as the other turned away. I'll prepare as well. We can leave in about 15 minutes. Fine by me. He didn't know yet what was about to come or how his family would react. He felt fairly prepared for this, but in all honesty, it felt a bit like he was walking a forest blindfolded, constantly wary about the possibility of walking into a tree. He knew close to nothing about the spiker, let alone his family. All that he was aware of were their outdated ideas and apparently ignorant and mean-spirited attempts to scare people off. He knew that they were fairly wealthy, and that's it. Sakusa had a sister and a brother. He hadn't said much about them, so Atsumu assumed they either weren't coming or weren't the problem. He knew that Komori would attend, but wasn't sure about his parents. In the end, it was barely enough to guess. Sakusa mentioned his strict upbringing only briefly, but Atsumu had a slight suspicion that as soon as he'd crossed the doorstep, he'd have broken already 10 rules, yet when he asked him about it, Sakusa said not to worry. This was perfect. After all, he wanted them to be bothered and not to earn their respect. He was right, of course. Ami, this is not a house. Sakusa glanced at him from the side, his hands clenched into fists and hidden inside the pockets of his dark coat. His dark eyes were vigilant and cold. The closer they got to the house of his parents, the more his tension grew. He raised an eyebrow at the blonde's sudden outrage. This is a mansion! You told me your parents were wealthy, not rich enough to buy me and my whole family. Sakusa rolled his eyes. You're exaggerating. I'm not. Is this a problem? There was a tinge of nervousness adding to the already wild storm inside him. Would Atsumu back out now? Didn't he want to do this anymore? He gulped. Sakusa didn't know how to feel about it if Atsumu would back out now. He wouldn't blame him. It was probably better if he didn't drag Atsumu down with him. He shouldn't have to endure... A boisterous laugh made Sakusa jump as the blonde suddenly seemed ecstatic. Did he become mad? He looked at him in horror. This is gonna be more interesting than anticipated. Let's go, Ami. He grinned widely. SakuAtsu was stunned as he observed the mischievous glint in his eyes. He couldn't understand how Atsumu wasn't terrified when he himself was paralyzed by fear. Maybe he truly was mad. Oh, can I touch you? Don't worry, I showered and I'll back away as soon as we're out of sight. He nodded slowly, but couldn't help but flinch when Atsumu's arm wrapped around his. His touch was gentle and careful. He made sure to leave a certain distance between them while looking as close as they could possibly be. The front door opened, revealing a lavish hallway and one of the housekeepers SakuAtsu had known for years. They were friendly and always made sure to gift him sweets when his parents treated him harshly. Now they looked at him and Atsumu with curiosity in their eyes and a smile spreading on their face. The words of congratulations were already on their lips when the voice of his mother echoed through the room. She rushed over from the living room at the sound of the door, thrilled to see her son. If only this excitement would last when she saw them. But of course, it didn't. Her eyes fell on Atsumu and the smile turned into a scowl. There was so much judgment in her eyes, she didn't need to say a single word to convey how she felt about this. But of course, she wasn't nice enough to grant them her silence. I didn't know you'd bring guests, Kiyomi. Her voice resembled an icy blade, as if she intended to cut the connection between them this instant. She crossed her arms over her chest and looked Atsumu up and down, lingering at the makeup and earrings and pressing her lips tighter together with everything she didn't approve of. Mother, this is Mia Atsumu, my boyfriend. I hope you will welcome him since he's part of the family. Not sure I would say it like that. She was never subtle about her disdain, but the mask dropped incredibly fast today. No more games to pretend. Was it the warning in SakuAtsu's voice, an attempt to show him that no, she would not accept him, or even so much as treat him nicely? Or was it Atsumu himself, who admittedly dressed much more provocatively than anyone he had brought home before? Of course! How thoughtless of me. I haven't even introduced myself. As Ami said, I'm Mia Atsumu, but please call me Atsumu. I have a twin and I'm used to it to avoid confusion. So informal. They would hate it. Internally, SakuAtsu smiled, watching his mother getting increasingly uncomfortable by nothing but Atsumu's presence. She flinched as he addressed him with his typical nickname, and for the first time, SakuAtsu was willing to admit he really liked it. Anyways, it's so nice to meet ya, SakuAtsu-san. He laid on the accent heavily and extended a hand which she ignored. Aside from looking at him as though he was a dead rodent the cat had left in front of her feet, she didn't acknowledge him at all. So, how long will your friends be staying, Kiyomi? As long as I. If you have a problem with that, we'll leave this instant. Don't be like that, baby. I want to get to know your family. Then he turned to his mother again. He keeps everything about you such a mystery. I guess he always was like that, wasn't he? She took a deep breath to calm herself before looking at SakuAtsu with pleading eyes. Does it really have to be like this? I prepared It does. His eyes narrowed, and he almost wished she'd just sent them away so they could return home and forget about this whole thing. But of course, she wouldn't. The preparations had taken too much time, and she wanted him there. And most importantly, she could not convince him to break up with Atsumu when they left now. Your father will not like this. He'll survive it. She sighed heavily and stepped aside. Fine then. Go inside and get settled. Your friend looks strong. Why doesn't he bring your luggage to your rooms? Room. We only need one. And why make him do it when usually this job is done by the attendants? She was getting flustered and was about to spew some nonsensical arguments at them when Atsumu saw the perfect opportunity to dig his grave just a little deeper. That's no problem, darling. After all, I know how much you love it when I use my muscles. He winked at him, and Sakusa was certain his cheeks had never changed colors from pale white to red so quickly. He almost choked on air, but got a hold of himself just in time. His mother had no such composure and quickly called over an attendant to handle their stuff. Thanks, Mother. He said it as nonchalantly as possible while Atsumu feigned sadness at the lost opportunity, but willingly let Sakusa guide him inside and upstairs. The room he led him to was odd. Clean and white, almost sterile, with little decor and only the occasional spots of color. Ami, if you're gonna tell me that this used to be your childhood bedroom, I'm gonna weep. It's sad. The taller looked at him unimpressed, thanking the attendants for making such quick work of their luggage before turning towards Atsumu. It's not. I have no room in this house anymore. This is just a guest room I use when being forced to spend the night here. Atsumu looked confused as he let himself fall onto the bed. The only bed. Sakusa tried not to think about what that implied. Then, where is your childhood bedroom? Surely you had one. They didn't let you sleep on the floor, did they? Because that'd be... Yes, I had one. Atsumu's eyebrows raised in a silent question. It was clear the day I came out. They just owned me for a week and decided since they didn't have their youngest son anymore, there was no reason to keep my stuff. It's awful. It was the first time he heard Atsumu speak so quietly, almost softly. He just shrugged his shoulders. It's not like this was a secret, but since he never talked much with anyone, especially not about his family, it could as well have been one. Talking about it with Atsumu now felt different. I got them back for it. The week they kicked me out, I went couch surfing with my best friend at the time. I slept with him every chance I got, so if at all, they have driven me right into his arms. Atsumu burst out laughing. That's hilarious. But please tell me he wasn't on it. He was. After the first time. I didn't want to use him like that. Still, I'm not proud of it. After a while, he asked me for something more serious, and I turned him down. We weren't friends after that anymore. Why was he telling him this? This part certainly felt like it should be a secret, yet he talked so freely when Atsumu was with him, as though the blonde... As though he... What? As though he could trust him? What a jerk! Sakusa rolled his eyes at the setter's childish way of thinking. He wasn't. It was my fault. We could have been friends for longer if I hadn't opened that door and allowed him to catch feelings. Atsumu stared at him dumbfounded. And here I thought you were supposed to be the smart one. Ami, you act as though catching feelings worked like a cold and you coughed at him. Sakusa flinched. Sorry, bad analogy. All I'm saying is that I'd never thought you'd be stupid enough to blame yourself for how someone else feels. You always seem so aloof, so above everyone. Sakusa didn't know what to reply and simply turned away. Dinner is in a few hours. If you don't mind, let's stay here for now. Keeping up the whole lover's act is gonna be exhausting enough later. Atsumu sighed, but agreed. His eyes straying to the ceiling and staring at something in the distance Sakusa couldn't see. Was he already regretting his decision to come here? The worst hadn't even started. I'll take a quick shower. There was a bathroom connected to this room and another down the hall. I'll take the one down the hall then. He got up swiftly without Sakusa having to ask him, grabbed the things he needed to shower, a new set of clothes and a bag filled with various makeup products. He was gonna have fun with this. Sakusa stared at him. He couldn't help it. Atsumu looked forbiddingly attractive. After returning from the shower, he put on a white shirt and a red suit and matched it with red eyeshadow and black eyeliner and accessories similar to the ones from before, lavish earrings and a small chain at his collar. He added the finishing touch by putting on a tie, purposefully leaving it a bit loose and crooked, probably to piss off his uptight parents, and a few simple golden bracelets. Like what you see, Ami? He could feel his cheeks warming, but didn't let his stoic mask drop as he fixed his own tie, a red one, adding a pop of color to his black suit. They could have planned this, the way they matched. Who knows, maybe Atsumu did. Did he know Kiyomi well enough to predict his choice of clothing? Sakusa looked at him from the corner of his eyes, trying to make anything of the way he was acting, but falling short. He tried in vain to convince himself that that couldn't be the case, that it was pure coincidence. Because if it wasn't, that meant that Atsumu paid so much more attention to him than he did to Atsumu. It meant that he was ignorant as his parents, that he was selfish. He gulped and let his hands drop to his sides. Funnily enough, when he looked in the mirror now, his tie was crooked too, and he felt no desire to change that. When they went down to the dining hall, his mother was already there, and his sister was just taking a seat. Aside from them, was only the man of his family that was still amiss. When Atsumu came into view, his mother stiffened while his sister looked up surprised. Her gaze wandered between him and the blonde, who saw this as the perfect opportunity to intertwine their fingers and reach up to kiss his cheek. Sakusa stiffened. They had agreed on this beforehand, but it still caught him off guard. Instinctively, he held onto his hand tighter, but to his own surprise, didn't back away. The slight tickle Atsumu left behind when he kissed him felt odd, but not like he wanted to back away, rather as if he wanted to lean in for more. Maybe this would be easier than expected. Somehow, he knew that he could trust Atsumu. He saw with his own eyes how much the other tried to accommodate him and make him feel at ease, and it worked. He knew that Atsumu was safe. The reaction to the kiss was instant. His mother cleared her throat, her eyes filling with disgust as she looked at them while his sister smirked. He knew that as soon as she got the chance, he'd get teased relentlessly, and somehow he awaited it with excitement. It was nice to have a somewhat normal reaction to bringing home his boyfriend. Before a conversation could stir up, the doors opened again, and in came his brother, sister-in-law, and shortly following behind them, his father. Quickly, Sakusa and Atsumu took their seats. Atsumu sat opposite to his sister, next to Sakusa to his right. To Sakusa's left sat his mother, at the head of the table, and to her left his sister-in-law. His brother sat next to his sister, and at the other end of the table his father, leaving the only free chair between him and Atsumu for Komori once he would arrive. In most families, it would probably be considered odd to split the couples like this, with his sister sitting between their brother and his wife, but his parents were old school and always kept them separate. They relaxed a little after the wedding, but still. It was all the more reason why him and Atsumu sitting next to each other and sharing a room was a thorn in their eyes. Dinner started and trivial conversations were picked up, but Sakusa couldn't care less for that. He usually kept to himself at these events and only answered in brief, short sentences. Today, he was even more tense than usual, constantly on edge and waiting for Atsumu to start his act. The blonde, however, was quiet. His vigilant eyes, the eyes of a setter, flew from person to person, observing and gathering information. He sat lazily in his chair. His presence alone seemed to disturb the order and peace, yet he waited. Like a beautifully designed trap, a poisonous flower luring in its victims, he waited for someone to approach him. And when they did, the trap fell shut. "So, and who are you? I'm assuming Ayuka brought you. Has she finally found a boyfriend?" His father's tone was polite. There was a slight strain in his voice, undoubtedly brought on by Atsumu's appearance, yet he could overlook that if it meant his daughter would finally get settled. With her hesitancy to start the perfect family life they envisioned for her, she was the biggest disappointment after their gay son. Sakusa could see a dangerous smirk spreading on Atsumu's face as he sat up straight and put on a schooled expression of feigned politeness. Before he could answer, however, his sister burst out laughing. "Father, don't you know by now not to get your hopes up? I don't desire a husband, nor do I wish to bear children." She made a point to sound extra formal as she echoed their words and wiped them away with a careless gesture. His mother jumped at the opportunity not to talk about Atsumu further and reached out to grab Kaya's, their sister-in-law, hand. "Sweetheart, don't worry. You will meet the right guy eventually, and then you can be just as happy as Kaya-chan." She glanced at her clearly swollen belly and asked to pet it, which Kaya agreed to with a slight forced smile. Kaya was lovely. So lovely, in fact, that he had no idea how she ended up with an idiot like his brother. But admittedly, they were cute together, and his brother had gotten his priorities straight after she threatened to leave him in a particularly nasty fight. Just like the rest of them, Ichiro struggled to unlearn the toxic shit their parents taught them, and didn't consider them equal in the relationship, at first, putting the job over his family. He must really love her, because after she showed him how much this way of thinking hurt her, he made an effort to change and get help. His father wasn't thrilled, but Ichiro had nothing to worry about. After all, there were 2 children more disappointing than him. Him going to therapy and planning on being a better father to his children paled in comparison. Ayuka rolled her eyes at her mother's comment and got even more frustrated when she talked about the business she built, all on her own, but her parents almost immediately tried to change the topic. However, Atsumu wouldn't let them. "That sounds amazing. What products do you sell?" Her eyes lit up and she leaned over the table to engage in conversation with him instead. "Plushies." Atsumu looked confused, and from the corner of his eyes, Sakusa could see his father sighing in exasperation. You see, the plushies in stores are always so boring, at least that's what I thought as a kid. So I let my creativity run wild, and now we have a whole bunch of crazy designs. At least twice a year we collaborate with a couple of charities and personally visit the children at hospitals to give them some of our best. Dogs made of lettuce, or cupcake cats, or... Yes, those are really cute. Just think about how much your own children would love them. The room fell silent and Ayuka glared at her. In an attempt to defuse the situation, Kaya chimed in. On that note, can you give me some recommendations from your inventory? I would love to get some for our little ones. Again, Ayuka's eyes brightened and she nodded. Of course, I'd bet it'd be adorable to see them play with them. Oh, are you expecting multiples? Atsumu casually made conversation while Sakusa just watched. Having him by his side and talking made everything a lot more bearable. He knew how to influence a conversation, and Sakusa loved the way him and his sister seemed to be getting along. He made them feel appreciated. He made him feel appreciated. Yes, twin girls. She smiled and lovingly caressed his stomach. It was a touching sight, and Sakusa did his best to ignore his father's sour expression. He wasn't happy to hear that the family name wouldn't be carried on by his son. Sakusa just hoped his brother had enough courage by now to not let them pressure her into having another kid just for the sake of continuing the family name. I'm a twin too, and if you ask my mother, I was the problematic one, which obviously isn't true at all. Samu was much more demanding. He laughed and Kaya chimed in. But either way, I'm afraid you two will have to prepare for lots of chaos. Yeah, I've been told that a lot, but we'll be able to handle it, right, Ichiro? His brother nodded and hummed in agreement. A genuine smile spread on his face as he looked at his wife, and Sakusa couldn't help but feel happy for them. I haven't got your name yet. Who are you again? His father's eyes zeroed in on Atsumu, and this time there was no way of averting the topic. There was no need to either. Atsumu had been waiting for this. As did Sakusa, however, he was anxious instead of excited, and just wanted to get it over with. He's Miya Atsumu, a friend of Kiyomi. His mother was quick to twist the story in her favor, but without success. Not quite. Actually, I'm his boyfriend. He took Sakusa's hand again and gave it a reassuring squeeze as he noticed how stiff he'd gotten. The room fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. For a moment it seemed as though everyone in the hall was holding their breath, awaiting his father's response. However, nothing came. He mumbled something incoherent before returning his attention to the food. Stage 1. Ignoring. Atsumu looked like he wanted to say something more, to provoke him further, but Sakusa stopped him. He held his hand tightly and whispered a barely audible "yellow" under his breath. The blonde stopped immediately and looked at him concerned. His eyes lit up in understanding when they met Sakusa's. Not yet. Soon, but not yet. So he leaned back, observing but never letting go of Sakusa's hand. So, Ichiro, are you and Kaya planning on any more children after these two? He pretended Atsumu wasn't even there. Kaya stiffened a little in her seat as she was addressed. Not directly, of course. In his father's eyes, she had little say in the matter. We're not sure yet. As for now, we'll focus on our little girls. There was more he wanted to say. Sakusa could see it, but he bit his tongue. Certainly, I'm not talking about right away. Though it would be optimal, Sakusa added for him. But surely you won't be satisfied with just 2. His eyes bore a hole through both of them, and Kaya tried making herself even smaller in her chair. It was a demand. They mustn't be satisfied with just 2. He wouldn't allow it. Whenever Sakusa saw Kaya at these events, she seemed intimidated and small. He knew she feared his father, and he couldn't blame her. It was so utterly different from the times they crossed paths outside of family gatherings. She was lively and passionate. She loved to tinker with mechanics as much as she loved tinkering with ribbons and paper. Her smile, much like Hinata's, could brighten a room, and she was protective of the ones she loved. Maybe, but we'll focus on the presents for now. The twins are taking a toll on Kaya, and she's already doing very much. She's exhausted. Now is not the time for such considerations. Sakusa was actually impressed with his brother and nodded in approval. A mistake. Kiyomi, what about you? Any chance you will grace us with a grandchild in the future? Sakusa's grip tightened and his eyes narrowed. Here it goes. The tension broke and he felt himself relaxing as suddenly a laugh lit up the room. Atsumu gently patted the back of his hand to calm him before addressing the topic himself. I'm afraid it's way too early to think about something like kids. We just decided to move in together once we're financially stable enough, but kids? He laughed again. Nah, without jobs, it'd be way too busy. Maybe in the future, but certainly not right now. What do you think, love? Sakusa caught himself imagining it. For a split second, he sees Atsumu with a kid on his shoulders, both waving in his direction and laughing as the sun illuminates their faces, and he gulped. Why, he needed to get a grip on himself. What was he doing? I'm not sure. It was barely convincing. He knew that himself, but he couldn't help it. He was torn between the pretended romance and getting lost in pointless fantasies. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's way too early to decide. Atsumu saved the act and moved closer to him to make a point. I wasn't talking to you. You can't bear children. Wait, really? Atsumu acted shocked and surprised before laughing again. Of course I can't. I was talking about adoption, old man. Giving a child a loving home who never got the chance to. Everyone looked at him as if he had lost his mind addressing their father like that. That was everyone but Kaya. Quiet, timid Kaya, the only other outsider besides Atsumu, laughed, a clear, bubbly laughter that filled the room and earned her equally as flabbergasted looks. Perhaps we should end dinner for today. I hope everyone is sated. A round of nods and quiet mumbling. Very well, up to bed then, and Kiyomi, I expect you to teach your boyfriend, she hurled the word like an insult, how to behave in this house. Sakusa said nothing but returned her scorching glare with cold precision. Stage 2 has begun. Before they left to their room, Atsumu made them pause at the bottom of the stairs. Sakusa looked at him confused as Atsumu waited until he heard steps coming closer. I'm sorry. It did nothing to clear his confusion until, just before the steps entered the hall, Atsumu pulled him down and into a deep kiss. Sakusa's brain effectively shut down the moment their lips touched. Atsumu's were soft and warm. He moved in perfect sync with his own as his hands kept his cheeks, one entangling itself in his hair, the other feeling down his neck to his collarbone. His skin burned under his touch, but not with the usual desire to push him away. He wanted him closer, wanted his lips to move to the spots his fingers mapped out. He wanted him to leave marks on the perfectly clean canvas of his skin, and he wanted to touch him. He wanted to explore the blonde the same way he wanted to be explored. Only when he heard someone clearing their throat behind them, SakuAtsu was torn back rudely into reality. Right, this wasn't real. It was just for show. Atsumu didn't kiss him because he desired him in the same way. He kissed him because he was doing him a favor. His lips still burned with invisible flames of passion Atsumu left on him, and his skin still itched to be marked. His heart was racing. It wasn't fair. Why was this happening? Why must he react to Atsumu in this way? He turned around briskly and left to run toward the room. He didn't even check who the person was walking in on them, who it was Atsumu put on a show for. He didn't care. Back in the room, he immediately went for the bag to search for pajamas and saw the ridiculous rainbow ones Atsumu got for them, but ignored them and reached for the plain ones he packed himself before rushing to the bathroom. He took his time scrubbing off the stress of the day until some patches of skin turned angrily red, specifically a small area above his collarbone. When he returned to the room, Atsumu was already there in a simple t-shirt and shorts. His hair was damp. He looked at Kiyomi apologetically, though his expression darkened further when he saw the red spot. Ami, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to push things too far. I didn't even give you the chance to deny or say. You didn't. It's okay. We agreed on this beforehand, and I don't have a problem with it. Atsumu didn't look convinced in the slightest, and his gaze wandered to the red spot again. Don't push yourself, Kiyomi. You shouldn't. Not for them and not for me. But he wanted it. He wanted the kiss, and so much more that he couldn't say it. The words got stuck in his throat, and if he told him, wouldn't it look like he used him to get what he wanted? Like this was just a twisted game to him? Atsumu, I really don't care. Don't worry. After a bit of hesitation, he added, You were great today. Thank you. Atsumu's head perked up, and he gave him a small smile. No problem, Ami. I really like your siblings, you know? They are nice. Yes, they are. But don't let them fool you. They can be super annoying. And Atsumu laughed. He would have never imagined he'd ever hear SakuAtsu say such things, but here they were. You have such a soft spot for them, admit it. SakuAtsu rolled his eyes, but observed him fondly as the blonde laughed. A warmth spread within his chest. Suddenly, Atsu's smile faltered, and he got up to retrieve something from his bag. SakuAtsu sat down on the bed, expecting him to follow soon after, and suddenly he stood before him, a small box of cream in hand. It helps with irritated skin. May I? SakuAtsu was stunned. When did Atsumu start to care so much? He nodded as if in a trance, and soon felt the gentle fingers applying the cool ointment on the affected area. He didn't feel the warmth rising as before, but his heart still hammered wildly in his chest, so strong, so loud that he was afraid Atsumu could feel or even hear it. There, all set. He was still so incredibly close to him as their eyes met, and for a moment made no attempt to get away. For a moment, SakuAtsu dared to imagine what it would be like if he leaned forward now and stole a kiss. One that undoubtedly was meant for no one but them. Before he could decide, before he could so much as realize what he was doing, Atsumu pulled away again. He stammered something incoherent, and SakuAtsu wasn't sure if he simply failed to concentrate or if it was Atsumu, but he didn't understand a word. They crawled up under the covers together without exchanging another word. There was a safe distance between them, as much as the bed allowed. When SakuAtsu woke up, the safe distance between them was gone. His eyes opened to the image of Atsumu's peaceful expression as he snuggled up to his side, and he found himself holding his breath as not to disturb him. The golden hair seemed to glow in the morning sun, and few freckles he never noticed from afar decorated the skin. He was gorgeous. There was a certain softness in his otherwise defined features when he slept, something pure that urged SakuAtsu to reach his hand out. He wanted to touch him, if just to confirm that he was real. Within the spiker blossomed the desire to wrap the blonde in his arms and protect him from anything wishing him harm. He couldn't explain it. They weren't this close, and even if Atsumu was strong, confident, and cocky, why should he want to be protected? Yet, in the tender light of the morning sun, he seemed vulnerable, almost fragile. SakuAtsu felt the rising and falling of Atsumu's chest, was nearly convinced he could hear his heartbeat as well as he allowed himself to indulge the moment a little longer. His eyes fell shut, and he concentrated on nothing but the warmth beside him. His thoughts and worries, his responsibilities, and the family he grew to disdain were driven from his consciousness by the faint touch of Atsumu's hand where it rested just below his clavicle. It was the same area he had touched so tenderly and intently the night before. SakuAtsu wished to be back in that moment when Atsumu decided to touch him, deliberately and of his own accord. He wished it could have been for them, not just a game of pretend. That moment was interrupted by the sound of the door swinging open, or more precisely by his sister marching in with little regard for the time and situation. SakuAtsu glared at her, but didn't voice his anger, in fear of waking the sleeping satyr at his side. Luckily, she noticed too, and had the decency to look a little bit guilty before this wicked smirk replaced it. She said nothing, and seemed to actually contemplate returning later when Atsumu stirred awake. SakuAtsu's expression darkened further, and he sent her a scorching glare, filled with murderous intent, before turning around to Atsumu with his usual mask of indifference. However, judging by Atsumu's face, it didn't work. He looked at him in a mixture of sleep-induced confusion and something he failed to recognize. A soft smile spread on his lips. His pupils were dilated and trained on him, and his cheeks took a faintly pink color. SakuAtsu didn't know how to react, and scarcely suppressed the urge to touch his face or brush the blonde strands from his forehead. His golden eyes were captivating, and he couldn't look away. Hence, he immediately saw the moment Atsumu fully woke up. His eyes widened and the blush darkened, and he averted his gaze only to find his sister standing by the door and getting even more flustered. A tirade of words seemed to assemble at the back of his throat as he stumbled backward and less than gracefully fell from the bed. Contrary to anything Sakusa would have imagined, all that he heard was a quiet whine. His eyes widened and he rushed to check on him. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. There was more, but one glance at Ayuka and he shut up again. Sakusa's brows were knitted together tightly in worry and confusion as he watched him slowly regain his composure and fight himself up from the ground. I'll go to the bathroom real quick. The ace was about to tell him that he could use the one connected to their room, but the setter left at a record speed, leaving a very disheveled-looking Sakusa at the mercy of his sister. So... Speaking of the devil, Ayuka entered the room fully, closing the door behind her and taking a seat on a chair opposite the bed. She watched him expectantly, observing how his confusion slowly morphed into his usual scowl. What do you want? Ayuka rolled her eyes, making a sweeping gesture toward the utter mess that was the bed and, most importantly, him, her brother, as though it was obvious. Care to explain? He kept silent, earning him an exasperated sigh. Okay, what am I gonna do with you? Look, here's what I know. I'll tell you, you fill the gaps. Let's play truth or lie. It was an old game they used to play. Turns out it was less of a game and more of an exercise on communication she disguised as a game. That witch tricked him. Though, admittedly, it was very useful, and the fact that she pulled it out now without judgment was reassuring. Your name is Kyo. You're my cute baby brother, and our family sucks. Truth or lie? Truth. She smiled. It became the standard opening over the years, and it immediately caused a familiar warmth to inhabit his system as he relaxed a little. Good. You and Atsumu play volleyball together, on the same team. Truth. You trust him a lot. Truth. You're in love with him, or in the process of falling. Truth. He couldn't deny it. They've known each other for the better of 2 years now. Well, technically even longer, but he didn't pay attention to anyone in his high school time after the incident. He always tried avoiding the topic of how he felt about the setter. Their communication consisted purely of banter and teasing, and Mia had the unbelievable ability to get under his skin like no other. He was the most annoying person he knew, but only because he was the only one he would subconsciously let close enough. In a way, he was scared that eventually Mia would force him, intentionally or not, to confront how he felt. Who knew Moteya would be the real problem? Your boyfriend. She knew the answer. He saw it in her eyes. Lie. Sasuke nodded slowly, observing him carefully. Here's what I know. You are falling for that Mia guy hard. You love him and he makes you happy. He flinched at that, knowing what she was referring to. Sometimes loving someone wasn't enough. Sometimes it wouldn't bring happiness but despair and hurt more than it healed. For some reason, you came here introducing him as your boyfriend, even though that's not what you are, and he plays along. Now you are conflicted. You want to confess, but something is keeping you from it. A heavy sigh, then... Atsumu and I made a deal. He would pretend to be my boyfriend in the name of pissing off our parents. I help him win a bet. It was Motoya's idea. I wasn't aware of my feelings at the time. I don't know if he feels the same, and... He staggered and paused, trying to sort his thoughts. Atsumu had fled the room so quickly that he forgot most of his stuff, including clothes. He was leaning with his back against the locked bathroom door, out of breath. His heart was hammering wildly in his chest and cheeks glowing, burning in a bright red. Shit, did he mess up? What was that just now? The image of Sakusa lying next to him, looking at him with those soft, dark eyes. The black curls framing his pale face perfectly, the cute molds decorating his forehead, and that tender smile on his lips. He couldn't think clearly. In that very moment, his expression seemed almost loving, and Atsumu had forgotten all about reality. He wasn't actually in a romantic relationship with Sakusa. They weren't actually sharing a bed and kissing because they were in love. He shouldn't be in love with him because Sakusa wasn't either. A lump built up in his throat, accompanied by familiar stinging in his eyes. Shit. Fuck. What was he doing here? His breathing turned shallow, and he let his head slump against the hardwood of the door. He should have known this was an awful idea. He should have. It wasn't like these feelings were completely new to him. From the very first moment he saw him, Atsumu was interested. Sakusa was, without a shadow of a doubt, attractive, catching Atsumu's attention the moment he laid eyes on him. It wasn't until much later that sexual and aesthetic attraction turned into something more, spreading out into dangerous, romantic territory. It was a slow, barely noticeable process, which he blamed the spiker for entirely. He was so hard to catch, to have a conversation or spend time with. In the end, he didn't realize his feelings until way too late, which he also blamed Sakusa for. By then, they had grown into a raging storm, leading him automatically into his brother's shop to dramatically bawl his eyes out since his crush was so out of reach. Osamu had patted his back half-heartedly while Rin collected pictures for his blackmail folder. Cold-hearted bastards. Yet it was said cold-hearted bastards he called when he finally got his stuff together well enough, only to break down the second Osamu answered. Samu! There was a sigh on the other end of the line as he heard Atsumu's whining, knowing what this was about already. Good morning to you too. Atsumu huffed, which turned into a sniffle because his throat was partially blocked. Okay. What is going on? Omi, he So, we made this deal and... Atsumu, speak clearly. I need all the details to know what weapon I need to use and how long to drag it out. Oh, who are we killing? Suna's voice echoed from the background. Sakusa, he made Sumu cry. Well, that's the usual. What's different this time? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Samu, stop. Then explain. And don't think I wouldn't do it if he deserves it. If you do, you're even dumber than you look. We look the same. Nah, Sam was the attractive one. Suna! They succeeded in calming him enough to tell the story. It was met with stunned silence. Are you gonna say something or what? This is... wow. I mean, wow. Suna hummed in agreement. I mean, I knew you were stupid, but not that stupid. I'm not. Why? Should I have turned him down? What would you have done? I don't know, but not that. Look, let me ask you one question. Why don't you man up and confess right now? I can't just... Yeah, but why not? Well, because... I don't know if he feels the same. He said he doesn't like me. Well, that's a fucking lie. He ignored it. And if I confess now, won't he assume I just played with him? Exactly. But I didn't mean... I know that. You probably were too stupid to consider the consequences of your actions again, and just wanted to spend time with him. Yet it effectively got you in this awkward position. Ayuka, if I tell him now, won't he think I just used him? You didn't know. From what you have told me, you weren't aware of how deep your feelings ran. You can only work with what you know. I could have known. He should have known. His words were a whisper at best. I avoided thinking about it. Okay, so you've been an idiot again. Nothing new there. The important part is, how do we fix it? He looked at her, surprised, and resembling a kicked puppy a little too much for her taste. Oh man, look, your options are limited, I will admit that. But don't you think Atsumu would understand if you explained it? What if he doesn't even like me like that? Damn, Kyo, you're blind. No, that's unfair. Blind or not, everyone would notice this. She got up and after waiting for his nodded approval, pulled him into a brief embrace. I love you, my poor idiot baby brother. And I won't tell you what to do, but if you want my advice. He wasn't sure at this point with all the subtle insults pointed at him, but didn't interrupt her either. In a way, Ayuka and Komori were the only real family relations he had, and her sharp words felt oddly comforting. Take a bit of time to think about it. Don't confess to him like this when you're a total mess. Maybe even wait until you're at home again, safe and sound in a familiar, comfortable environment, and then just be honest. It was easier said than done, but it did sound logical. He replied nothing, already deep in thought, but she seemed to understand and left him alone to decide. Atsumu was already sinking deeper into despair while his brother attempted his best to salvage what could be saved. The most important part now is not to rush things. You don't want to overwhelm him, yeah? Okay. He sniffled and Asamu sighed again. Good, then calm down. Have fun this weekend and think about how to confess after. I don't want to. You're not using him. Not just did you agree on this beforehand, but honestly, does any of that act before his family feel sincere? Or like something between the two of you? No. See, you don't think about him when you're with them. You don't get to enjoy your time together. No, you're thinking about how you can piss those assholes off the best. It's not comparable, so calm down, would ya? He sniffled again, but nodded, and even though Atsumu couldn't see him, he seemed to understand. Good, so now do me a favor and do your best to giving this shitty family what they deserve for hurting my future brother-in-law. And don't forget to mention that I know how to get rid of a body. Before he could fathom what his brother just said, Asamu ended the call, leaving Atsumu speechless. With a bit of effort, he fought himself up from the ground and dragged himself into the shower after quickly discarding his clothes and tossing them to the side. He would have to wear them again once he left the shower, but he didn't care. But Sakusa would. Sakusa would care. That's how he found himself walking down the hallway, naked except for the towel wrapped around his waist. He decided to make the best of it and add to the act, taking prideful strides to their room in case anyone wandered by and risked a look. Maybe it was shameless, but Atsumu didn't care. He had nothing to hide. In fact, he worked hard for these muscles, so why not show them off from time to time? Sakusa seemed to be of a completely different opinion, judging by the shock in his eyes. He choked on air and turned away, his cheeks burning up. Put on some goddamn clothes, Mia. Atsumu smirked dangerously, but he did as he was told, deciding to push things a little further today. Sakusa still struggled to calm his racing heart, trying in vain to convince himself that this was just the same as when they were changed together in the locker rooms. Yet, he knew it wasn't. He didn't expect to see him like that and failed to control his reaction. Deep breaths. It's gonna be alright. Atsumu asked to look around for a bit, so that was the plan for today. Under no circumstances would he risk leaving him alone to accidentally cross paths with his parents so they could say to him whatever vile things came to mind just because he wasn't around. In other words, he'd give him a tour of the house today, and much more importantly, the gardens. They were his personal favorite. He smiled as he thought about the calm atmosphere that always hung in the air around the trees. His parents rarely went out further than a couple of yards where they would host tea parties, so the rest was mostly kept untouched. The housekeepers kept it in shape, but didn't go out of the way to remove weeds and similar things. It resulted in beautiful meadows filled with wildflowers and dandelions. Whatever nonchalance he had accomplished while thinking about the gardens vanished as soon as Atsumu entered the room. Asada didn't lie when he said his outfits would get progressively more provocative. Yet Sakusa still failed to imagine this. It wasn't overly sexual or sensual, nor did it show a lot of his body except for his muscular legs. The overall image seemed to almost have an innocent touch to it, as though Atsumu had no idea what he was doing at all. That illusion was quickly destroyed by the dangerous, mischievous glint in the setter's eyes. Atsumu was wearing a yellow skirt with a dark grey sweater. It was simple, really, but gorgeous nonetheless. The yellow complemented his golden eyes perfectly, and the dark sweater created a stark contrast to the lighter colors of his skirt and skin. You like it? You look good. Then, as though Atsumu's enthusiasm was contagious, he smirked as well. My parents will hate it. Atsumu laughed. I figured. The first part of the walk went uneventful. As expected, his parents weren't in the gardens and they could enjoy the calm surroundings without much disturbance. Atsumu clung to his arm since they left the room, waving happily at Kaya as they passed the living room, who returned the gesture with a smile and smirked as his mother gasped, watching them from afar. He gave her the same bright smile, pretending he had no idea what could be the reason for her sorrow. However, even after they left the room and followed a narrow path deeper into the greenery outside until a veil of leaves covered them from unwanted eyes, Atsumu never let go. And Sakusa didn't want to either. He was oddly content with having Atsumu this close. They leisurely strolled through the trees and meadow, talking about trivial things and enjoying the gentle warmth of a spring sun. The weather was perfect, mild and not too warm, but the freezing cold of winter had long passed. Atsumu did most of the talking as usual, and Sakusa listened as usual. However, this time he didn't pretend he wasn't, as he watched the setter fondly. He was so expressive and lively. It was a quality considered undesirable when he grew up. He missed it. Somewhere between Atsumu daydreaming of his brother's food and complaining about the rather strict meal plan he had to follow during the season, Sakusa's thoughts drifted off. He imagined what it would be like if this was real. If he would come back to this place in half a year with Atsumu by his side again. Would the blonde try to act more amicable? Maybe even be intimidated by them like Kaya? He found it hard to imagine, yet wasn't it exactly because this wasn't real that Atsumu could act so carelessly? Would he even want to be dragged into this after seeing the worst of them? Ami? What? Atsumu looked at him with a frown, and something like concern reflected in his eyes. Are you okay? Do you need a break? Are you yellow? Atsumu, I'm okay. I'm sorry, I just spaced out. That is one way to put it. You seemed fully dissociated, like you weren't even here anymore, like... Okay, I get it. His voice sounded harsher than intended, and Atsumu stepped back a bit. He hadn't even noticed that the blonde had let go of his hand. Sakusa pressed his lips together tightly and hardened his mask so as not to let his disappointment show. Okay. Yeah, sure, you're okay. You can always say yellow. He took a deep breath to compose himself before answering. I'm okay. I'm green, I promise. He still didn't seem convinced, but didn't press the topic and just sighed. Fine. Let's go back. Darling? His usual smirk resurfaced, and he winked at him with his usual confidence. Sakusa rolled his eyes, but smiled. Atsumo's teasing sent his heart racing, and somehow he didn't hate this feeling anymore. Yes, lunch should be served soon. Would be a shame if we missed it. His grin grew even wider, and when Sakusa offered his arm, Atsumo's eyes lit up, and he took it without a second thought, pressing himself carefully to his side as they wandered back to the house. Lunch went more amicable than expected. He partially blamed the sudden brightening aura on Komori, who walked in shortly after them. Finally, took him long enough. The libero took one look at them, then his father and mother, who both did their best to pretend neither of them was attending, and burst out laughing. He grinned at his cousin knowingly and gladly took the seat next to Atsumo. Motoya, did you know about this? He didn't even try to feign some degree of friendliness or pretend that he didn't harbor a deep hatred. Sakusa could see the strain it cost him not to attack Atsumo directly. About them? Oh yeah, of course. Kyo wouldn't shut up about him. They are so adorably in love. Sakusa felt the distinct urge to punch his cousin, accompanied by grief that Atsumo served as a barrier between them and effectively put Komori out of his reach. For a moment, it didn't even occur to him that it could have been an act, but because, well, he really did talk about Atsumo a lot with him. To complain. Yeah. Suddenly, the heat pooling in his cheeks intensified, and he didn't dare look at the blonde next to him. That's good, right? Makes it more believable. He reaches his hand out for his glass, suspiciously eyeing Atsumo from the corner of his eye. The setter seemed to take the information in with delight, his gaze wandering from Komori to Sakusa as he propped himself up on the table and smirked. Oh, I didn't know you bragged to your cousin about me. Or did you just tell him about your deep, undying love for me? Sakusa glared at him over the edge of his glass, causing Atsumo to laugh, and he swore he heard his siblings join in as well. He was prepared to argue with both of them when Atsumo continued. Oh, don't be embarrassed, love. You don't want to know the things I told Samu. I can tell you that much. I was a total wreck. Probably scared of some of the customers. Sakusa choked on his drink, coughing in a struggle to regain his composure. Although Atsumo still couldn't suppress his amusement, he was quick to rush to Sakusa's side and rub his back apologetically. He leaned in and whispered, not so quietly, "Of course, I'd be always willing to show you later." He died. That could be the only explanation for this. The only logical consequence. And he must have gone insane long before, because right now, offering Atsumo the deal seemed like the work of a madman. That's enough! I'll allow no such things in this house. I forbid it! His father was almost as red in the face as Sakusa, fueled by rage. It looked as though his head would explode any minute now like an unproportional balloon. However, Atsumo met his gaze with nothing but faint surprise. Innocent, as though he had no idea what enraged him so much. My bad. Didn't mean for you to hear. He sheepishly scratched the back of his neck and settled in his seat again, closer to Sakusa than before. His father was breathing heavily, trying to harness his wrath. It was an odd and utterly unfamiliar sight. Kiyomi suspected that he held back in fear Atsumo could say even more outrageous things, which, to his credit, was a very likely possibility. In the background, Motoya, as well as Kaya, had a hard time stifling the laughs. He could see the glint of amusement in his siblings' eyes as well, but they were just like him, frozen in place by his father's anger. Didn't your father teach you correctly?
You must be a disappointment to your family. What kind of mother would have let her son go astray like that?
Saku. He noticed without a doubt his own mother flinching at the accusation. Both of them knew what hadn't been said. Kiyomi was a disappointment as well. His mother failed him and the family. She failed at raising him correctly. It was the one thing he and his father could agree on, but for entirely different reasons. He was pulled out of his thoughts by Atsumu's hand tightening around his own. At first, he assumed it was to ground him, but when he looked up, he saw that Atsumu's smile had vanished.
What is it? Cat got your tongue? Speak, boy.
My mother did amazing. She did everything she could, and
of course you'd hang on to her like a lost puppy. Isn't that always the case with people like you?
The room fell silent. No one dared utter a word.
See, I told you not to baby the boy too much just because he was the youngest. This is the result. Such disgusting things. You misled him.
Sakusa's mother sank even further into her seat, but Sakusa could see the flames of rage glowing in her eyes, the words resting just at the tip of her tongue, only restrained by her lips, which were sealed shut tightly. He hated her. He hated her for abandoning him, for all the awful parenting decisions she made. He hated her because she hated him. But sometimes he wondered what kind of woman she would be today if she and his father had never met. Atsumu was now reciprocating his father's anger. Rage bubbled up within him like hot magma, and before Sakusa could stop him, he stood up. How dare you talk to your wife and son like that? Don't you love them?
It is because I love them that I'm disappointed. Would one who didn't care even put in the effort to feel anything?
Lies.
All just stupid lies. You are despicable, treating your family as though they were replaceable, as though your word trumps theirs. Of course it does. What kind of fantasy world do you live in? Never had a father who taught you how things work, did you?
Atsumu suddenly got very quiet, and Sakusa didn't know what to do. He looked at him in shock as his eyes started to gloss over. To add salt to the wound, a smug smirk spread on his father's face as he observed the blonde closely.
So that's it, no father. Did he see what a pathetic excuse of a son you were and ran away? Father, that's enough. No, Kiyomi, keep out of this. No, you... If you hadn't brought him here, I wouldn't have said anything. This is your fault. I should have put you into one of those camps the moment you displayed any of this disgusting behavior, and not listen to that wife talk from your mother. Women are always too emotional about this stuff. Perhaps it was already too late to undo her damage, but at least you wouldn't have brought that into our home.
He looked at Atsumu as though he was less than the dirt on his shoes.
My father might have left us, but I still prefer that over having someone like you in my family.
He couldn't hide the tremble in his voice, but it was so filled with hatred that it didn't matter.
You don't even know the love of a father. You're just as pathetic and weak as the pathetic excuse of a father that left your mother alone to deal with you. A real father stays to make sure their sons don't become an embarrassment like you. He stays even when they are broken from the get-go and fixes them. I didn't run even though Kiyomi was always an odd child, weird from the moment he was born. If his mother hadn't been so lax with him, he could have turned out well. Instead, he's out there chasing a ball like a dog and bringing home diseases into our house. You are no different, just much worse. You're a dog infected with fleas, a stray he picked up on the side of the road, too disgusting for his own flesh and blood. Tell me, Kiyomi, do you hate us this much that you bring home a mud...
He was speechless. All of them were. It had never gotten this far. Next to him, he could feel Atsumu starting to tremble. He could hear his rigid breathing and saw the tears falling from his face like waterfalls. Atsumu. Hey, Ami. Do you know what Ashijima has been up to recently? All eyes were fixated on him in a mixture of shock and pity, except for his father's, who seemed convinced he had won and turned back toward his food, and his mother's, who still sat slumped over and looked at Atsumu as though he was a demon himself bringing misfortune on their family. As though it was his fault that his father lost his temper. At his words, confusion mixed with the overall shock, and Moteya and Ayuka looked at Sakusa in concern as the name fell, but the spiker understood. He gently placed an arm around Atsumu and guided him away.
You haven't been dismissed, Kiyomi.
His tone was sharp and laced with a warning. He hadn't been dismissed, but Atsumu had.
Bring your friend to the door and return immediately.
Anger filled his veins like fire. How ignorant! How... He couldn't understand how he dared to say such things. How could he think that Kiyomi wanted anything to do with him after this?
I won't. I only came because I wanted to introduce my siblings to my new boyfriend. Because I wanted to see the few people of this family again I actually cared about. You claim to care about me, but you don't. Otherwise you would be happy for me. Happy for you ruining your life? I care enough to try and stop.
Shut up! You don't care. Stop pretending. I was dead to you the moment I outed myself. You only torment me at this point. You hate me.
You should be grateful, Brett, that I still acknowledge you at all. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. Ask the mud. I said shut up. I won't listen to you insulting him anymore. Atsumu has never done anything to you. He is kind, caring, and the absolute best person I've ever met. I love him. If this is what having no father like you means, if this is the person I would have become without you, I would gladly change the past if I could. I would gladly grow up without a father, but with a mother that loves me.
He briefly looked over at her, showing her that he hadn't forgotten her involvement.
What are you saying, you ungrateful? I'm saying that I'm leaving. That we are leaving and I won't return, ever. You are awful parents. I will have to work my whole life to undo the damage you caused. But at least I won't have to do it alone.
With that, he turned around and left, not sparing them another glance. He slammed the door shut as soon as him and Atsumu were inside the guest room and frantically started to pack their things. Atsumu tried to help, but his hands were shaking too much. He was a mess. Sakusa paused as he noticed and swiftly closed the distance between them, holding his hands tightly. Stop. Let me do that. Atsumu looked like he wanted to say something, but couldn't. The only sound escaping his throat was a strangled sob, and it felt like a poisoned dagger being pierced into his heart. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Atsumu. Don't listen to anything he said. None of it is true, and none of it is your fault. I love you. You are loved. You are perfect. Even more tears fell, and his sobs grew in intensity, but he couldn't focus on that right now, when suddenly the sound of steps echoed through the hall. For a short moment he dared to hope it was one of his siblings, but he would have recognized these steps any time. They echoed, even in his nightmares. He jumped up quickly and locked the door,
placing a chair under the handle for good measure. Quick, I'm sorry that I put you in danger, but we got to leave now. He won't hurt us physically at least, but the quicker we get out of here, the better. He felt his own hand starting to tremble and gulped. Suddenly, Atsumu was by his side and helped him pack everything. He didn't say a word, just moved swiftly and effectively until they were ready to go. Just in time. A loud pounding at the door made both of them flinch, and instinctively their hands found each other, holding onto one another tightly. Kiyomi, open this door immediately! I won't tolerate such behavior! He didn't. Instead, he pulled Atsumu to a second door on the side. The guest room was connected to its own bathroom, which had a window just a few meters above the canopy, one level below. He felt like a teenager again, breaking out of the house in the middle of the night when things got particularly bad. His heart hammered wildly in his chest with the same fear as back then. Atsumu looked at him with a mixture of shock, horror, and determination as he followed Kiyomi's example with ease. When he was younger, he had broken a bone or two in these escape attempts, but now he was even better trained, and Atsumu was no different. They weren't parkour masters, but the quick reflexes and muscles built from years of volleyball came in handy. Upon landing safely in the garden, they rushed toward the car when suddenly his phone rang. Ayuka. Don't go to the garage. He's on his way there. We have to. Don't worry. Kaya got your car already. She snuck away the moment you left and asked one of the attendants to bring it to the front of the driveway. She will drive you home since I doubt that any one of you is in the right mind to do that right now. Is Ichiro? Ichiro knows. He's glad the faster she gets out of here. We would leave too, but we can't just leave everything like this. His throat tightened. He didn't want his siblings to take the fall for his mistake. I'm sorry. Don't be silly, Kyo. You have it the worst in this. We got this. We know how to sweet-talk him. She sighed. I know this sucks, and he's a dick. I'm sorry I didn't see how bad it was sooner. Now, before you say anything, we can talk about this later. Get out of here first and take care of Atsumu. He needs you. One glance at the blonde proved her right. Though Sakusa doubt it was him he needed right now. He was the one who got him into this whole mess. This was his fault, but he would make sure to look after him until he could bring him to Osamu. He'd drive the whole night if necessary. Thanks, Ayuka. I don't know how I can make it up to you. Later, now focus. With that, she hung up. Just as she said, they found Kaya waiting in the car at the end of the driveway, motioning for them to hurry, though Sakusa doubted his father would follow them so far. It looked disgraceful in his opinion. He never chased after him before. Kiyomi simply wasn't important enough. Give me that. He quickly maneuvered their bags into the trunk of his car before joining Atsumu in the backseat to this utter surprise. It wasn't until they were about half an hour from his childhood home that he finally started to relax. He hadn't let go of Atsumu's hand the whole time, and the blonde did not attempt to change that either. They were both lost in their own thoughts. A silence filled the car, only interrupted by the occasional sniffle from Atsumu. The blonde didn't look at him. His eyes were fixated on the landscape outside, rushing past them quickly as they hurried to leave the horrors behind. His eyes were red-rimmed and the tears never stopped falling completely. Sakusa wished he could do something to subdue them, but came up empty-handed every time.
He didn't know what to say, and somehow it felt wrong to break the silence. It felt wrong that he should be the one to make him feel better. This was his fault after all. Atsumu ought to hate him. If his father was right about one thing, then that Kiyomi was flawed, messed up. It was his fault, of course, but they didn't make it better. He had used Atsumu and deeply hurt him in the process. He knew that something like this would happen. Kaya said nothing, just throwing a few unsure glances at them through the mirror. Her eyes were filled with compassion, and if Sakusa wouldn't know any better, he would think she broke a few speed limits accidentally to get them home as quickly as possible. But he did know better. It wasn't accidental. The atmosphere in the car quickly became uncomfortable as Sakusa started to drown in thoughts surrounding Atsumu. What was he thinking right now? Did he even want to see him again? To him, it was certain that his chances with Atsumu were gone, but he hoped to at least be friends. Yet he doubted that it was possible. The tension grew, and he dreaded the moment someone would break it and talk. He dreaded the moment he would have to confront everything that happened, the moment when Atsumu would leave. Maybe he should start now and attempt to salvage what could be saved, to at least tell him how sorry he was, that he would take it all back if he could, because nothing stopped Atsumu from leaving as soon as they were home. Maybe he wouldn't get another chance to apologize. He wouldn't blame him, yet he still didn't dare utter a word. He wanted to stay in this illusion for a little longer, holding Atsumu's hand and feeling him close. Despite knowing how wrong it was, he wished they could have stayed longer at that horrible place, in the moments before his father ruined it. He wanted Atsumu to look at him like that again. Suddenly, he felt a strange stinging in his eyes and his sight blurred. Surprised, his hand flew up to his face, tears glistening on his fingertips as he pulled them away. Ami. Atsumu noticed the sudden change and looked at him, his brows furrowed. Sakusa couldn't quite decipher his gaze, but he dared to hope it was concern reflecting in those golden eyes. He turned away. He wasn't ready to face him yet. Perhaps he would never be. Kaya stopped in front of his apartment building and parked the car in his designated spot. She climbed out of the driver's seat and waited patiently for them to follow her example and discuss what to do next. It took a moment to shake themselves awake after the long drive. They were still in shock from everything that happened and had not yet had the chance to recover. Sakusa took a deep breath as he retrieved the bags. Thank you, Kaya. You did so much for us. She shook her head. It's no problem, really. I wanted to get out of there as well. She sighed and gently patted her stomach, smiling at them. It's all gonna be okay now. You didn't listen to a single word he said, yes? Sakusa nodded slowly. Okay. Well, I would offer to help you carry the bags, but I'm under the strict instruction not to lift heavy things. Too bad. I'll leave you to it. Kaya swiftly walked around the car, and it seemed as though she wanted to walk home when Sakusa stopped her. Wait, where are you going? You can't walk all the way, it's too far. I have a guest bedroom if you... No, you two need to talk and recover. I'd only be in the way. It's okay, there's a hotel nearby and Ichiro already called in ahead for me. We have it all planned out. He'll pick me up there tomorrow morning. Sakusa frowned and she laughed as she saw it. Oh please, let me have this evening for myself. Soon I'll have no time for myself at all. I need to make the most of this. I heard they have a great spa to relax and a buffet. She smiled brightly, and it was contagious. From the corner of his eyes, he could see Atsumo's lips tugging upward. Yeah, Ami, let her relax. The twins will make her life challenging enough soon. You would know. They laughed together before suddenly her gaze softened. Atsumo, I might not be a mother yet, but if my girls would grow up to be like you, I'd be very proud of them. Atsumo blinked rapidly to find the growing mist in his eyes. Can I hug you? Of course. She didn't even hesitate and closed the distance between them as best as possible with her belly in the way. Gently, she guided one of his hands to rest above the growing life within. Visit us when they are born, yes? They could use a good role model. Oh, and hey, bring your brother as well. I'd love to meet him. Oh, and your mother. She needs to give me some tips. She winked at him and turned around again. Wait, I'll drive you there. You can't expect me to let you walk on your own. I'm sure Ichiro would have my head for it if he finds out. A smaller rolled her eyes, but didn't argue further, and Sakusa suspected that she was actually glad not to have to walk as she settled in the car again, this time on the passenger seat. Before Sakusa followed her, he turned around to Atsumo. I know it's a lot to ask, but please wait for me to come back. I have no right to ask this of you, just... Hey, Ami, I'll wait. It's okay. He sighed in relief, though the tension didn't leave his muscles. This wasn't over yet. Here, let yourself in, get comfortable, and don't worry about messing anything up. I'll fix it later. You can eat or drink anything I still have left in my kitchen. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid it won't be much. Atsumo raised his eyebrows, his surprise growing as he felt the weight of keys being put into his hand. The cold metal grounded him, and slowly the reality of Sakusa's words sank in. He almost didn't recognize the ace with how careless they seemed. Before he could add anything, Sakusa left with Kaya, and suddenly he was alone again. The lock clicked, and suddenly Atsumo found himself in the very same apartment again he had only seen once before. Nothing had changed. Everything was exactly as it was 2 days ago. There was no reason why it should have changed, yet it still felt odd to see that it was exactly the same. So much had happened in the meantime that the static apartment seemed odd. Warm, golden orange light flooded through the window of the living room, setting the light walls and furniture ablaze. The whole place was spotless, and despite what Sakusa said, it felt wrong to change that. Atsumo knew he only wanted him to feel better, but he couldn't place why, nor did the idea of even changing anything remotely in this room make him feel better. The whole apartment screamed Sakusa Kiyomi, from the way it was organized to the light colors predominating the interior design, and somehow this was exactly what gave him comfort. The apartment hadn't changed, and Sakusa hadn't changed either. He was still the grumpy, gorgeous, and gentle ace he knew. Just that he had been given suddenly a lot more context. He wondered, was Omi's germophobia a result of his parents as well? The way they talked about him bringing home diseases due to being homosexual could have invoked this, couldn't it? He sighed, letting the bags fall from his shoulder before going back to neatly put them off to the side. The The kitchen caught his attention, and he remembered that SakuAtsu allowed him to use anything still in stock. He settled for preparing some tea, and while the water boiled, he quickly set off to the bathroom to inspect the damage. He looked a mess, and after a couple of minutes of uselessly trying to fixing himself in the mirror, he gave up and settled for a shower. He was sure Ami would prefer it this way as well. Oh, of course, their deal was over now, so there was no reason for him to touch him anymore, or even so much as tolerate Atsumo's touch. Fuck. He felt tears well up and impulsively punched the wall beside him. The pain felt good. It distracted him, and an all too familiar relief washed over him. He cursed under his breath and quickly put the water onto the coldest setting to chase the thoughts away. His gaze wandered to a couple of washed-out pale lines at his thighs. Scars. He promised his brother he wouldn't fall into old habits again. Deep breath. He dried himself off when he heard the front door click open and cursed. His stuff was still in the other room. Sheepishly and with his head hanging low, he walked into the living room with nothing but a towel around his waist. Sorry, I forgot my stuff. The words got stuck in his throat. What are you doing here? SakuAtsu carried the little stuff Kaya had packed in a hurry to her room while she called Ichiro to assure him that they were okay. If he was completely honest, he was stalling. He wanted to get back to Atsumo quickly, but at the same time, he didn't want to hear what he feared he would say. That he would leave and never come back. That they couldn't even be friends anymore. Not that they were friends to begin with. SakuAtsu hadn't been particularly nice to Atsumo. No, it's alright. Everything is alright. The twins are fine, though they have great fun kicking my bladder. Honestly, I feel like they will be more than a handful once they get and walk. Very energetic. He heard Karya's voice from the hallway, and she smiled as she set the bags down next to her bed. There was something in her eyes when she talked to Ichiro like this. Something warm and loving. SakuAtsu was happy for them. Suddenly, her smile faltered and her brows pinched together in concern. What? What do you mean he didn't return? SakuAtsu looked at her confused. He was about to leave, but she grabbed the corner of his sleeve to make him stay. On the other end of the line, he could hear Ayuka getting frantic, demanding the phone. Wait. I'll hand you to Kia. Confused, he accepted the phone. Kiyomi. Yes. Where's Atsumo? Is he still at your apartment? Yes. Why, you have to return now. Father hasn't returned. We suspect he might have followed you home. No idea what he wants, but don't let Atsumo deal alone with him. SakuAtsu's heart started racing. The idea of his father in his apartment was terrifying. That was his place, the place he ought to feel safe. The images of his room being emptied, rid of everything he ever loved, filled his mind. But yes, his father still had a key. At the very beginning, he still supported him in getting his own flat and offered financial aid in exchange for a key to check up on him. He should have declined. He was such an idiot. What did he want from Atsumo? He told the blonde his father wouldn't hurt them physically. That still stands, right? Thanks. He quickly handed the phone back to Kaya and sprinted down the hall to get to his car as quickly as possible. Is it just you here, or... Yes. Atsumo's eyes narrowed. He hated the disgust reflected in the man's eyes at the thought his son could have somehow been involved in his current state. He wouldn't allow him to insult Kiyomi any further. Good. This is actually much better than I hoped. Atsumo's teeth clenched together and he sat down on one of the kitchen chairs, still in nothing but a towel and never leaving the other out of sight. He didn't feel like turning his back toward him to even put on some clothes. Additionally, Sakusa's son seemed to hate how shameless he was, which only fueled Atsumo's decision. If he had to feel uncomfortable enduring whatever homophobic shit he spewed next, he should be uncomfortable as well. You truly have no manners, do you, boy? Deep breaths. Oh, I'm sorry. I was expecting someone else. I'm sure Ami would have loved it. His expression shifted into a disgusted grimace. Fine. I will only offer you this once, so you better decide wisely. I don't want my son to be seen with a mutt like you. You will break up with him. Break his heart so he will finally learn his lesson. The hell I will. You break up with him and I'll give you 1,000,000 yen. Take it or leave it. A cold laugh, devoid of any emotion, escaped Atsumo's throat. You must be an exceptionally bad example of character to think I would take such an offer. Who do you take me for? The last boy was smart enough. That's called being a heartless jerk, and I'm not one of those. 10,000,000 yen. Look, oh man, I don't care for your money. Other than you, I care for your son. So take your money and shove it up your ass for all I care. He got red in the face again with rage, but before he could elaborate, Kiyomi walked into the room, a little out of breath, and his eyes widened. He stared at his father with utter hatred filling his gaze. You bribed my boyfriend to break up with me? He was weak of character. You should have never... Shut up! His sister was sick, of course he would take the money! You're such a cold-hearted bastard! His father looked taken aback by that. He wasn't used to being talked to like that by his children, but whatever restrictions Kiyomi had put on himself before, they were gone. Get out! Get out and don't even think about coming back here! You don't talk to me in that tone! Get out! You have 10 seconds or I'll call the police. You wouldn't dare. Even if you wouldn't, I would. Atsumo grinned and lifted his phone. The first 2 numbers were already typed in and his smile only widened as he waved it at them. Tell him to stop. No. I said put him on a fucking leash. Now it was Sakusa's turn to get red in the face. Get out now, or he will call the police. If you think having a gay son is bad for business, maybe consider what an arrest will do. And don't you dare talk to Atsumo like that ever again. He is not a dog, he is my boyfriend. His father seemed now obviously conflicted, but got up, the prospect of being arrested sparking some kind of fear in him. Wait. He looked at him surprised, but Atsumo's expression was cool, calculated. The keys. What? Leave the keys. This is not your apartment. You have no right to them anymore. He looked like he wanted to argue, but Sakusa nodded. In his rage, he reached for them and threw them in Atsumo's direction. A sudden pain spread on his forehead as he wasn't quick enough to catch or avoid them. The ace rushed to his side and flinched as the door slammed shut. Tsumu, are you okay? He nodded. One hand covered the area where he had been hit, while he reached his other hand towards Sakusa, handing him the key. A cocky smile spread on his face as he presented the item to him triumphantly, but Sakusa could see the veil of tears covering his eyes. The cold sensation of metal was accompanied by something sickly warm and sticky.
Let me see.
It's not bad.
Then let me see.
He carefully removed his hand. There was a small gash at the beginning of his hairline, yet even though it was small, blood poured from it relentlessly, covering more and more of Atsumo's face.
Quick, come here.
He guided him toward the kitchen sink and started cleaning the wound with warm water. His touch was uncharacteristically gentle. It was as if his fingers left a trail of warmth behind on his skin. The ace quickly gathered a first aid kit and held a fresh gauze to his forehead. Despite the pressure, he quickly bled through it, and Sakusa had to apply a new one. By number 4, he started to panic when it slowly subsided. He fastened a piece of fabric with medical tape and gently cleaned the skin around it. In the haste of the moment, he didn't even notice how close he had gotten. A sudden warmth rushed to his face despite his best efforts to stop it in fear it might intensify the bleeding. Sakusa noticed too, his cheeks suddenly dusted in a light pink as he scattered backward.
Sorry.
It's okay. He averted his gaze.
Do you want me to bring you home?
Atsumo flinched and his expression twisted as though Sakusa had slapped him. He didn't want it to go home yet. There was so much left to say, and he didn't want to be alone right now.
Sakusa, please, don't call me that.
Atsumo looked up. There was pain reflected in his eyes, and he gulped. Ami, please don't throw me out yet. No, it's not fair, but I don't want to be alone right now. Sakusa's eyes widened, and for a moment it looked like he wanted to touch him, but held back.
Okay. I didn't think you'd want to stay.
Of course I do. Though, if you don't want me to,
No, I do. I do want you to.
A heavy silence went in the air as none of them dared to start what undoubtedly would be another tearful, depressing conversation. Would they waste part here? How would it be at practice the next weeks? Would they just pretend as though nothing happened? Atsumo doubt he could do that. He could feel Sakusa's gaze on him, but when he turned around, the ace quickly turned away. Atsumo grinned.
Like what you see?
He had asked that the last time too. This time, however, Sakusa just nodded quietly. His eyes wandered again, and Atsumo made no attempt to hide. He regretted it a moment later when Sakusa's eyes suddenly widened, and he knew what he must have found. Scars. Most of the time he forgot that they even existed. Sakusa instinctively extended a hand and traced them before he caught himself and quickly pulled his hand back. It's okay. They're old. Actually, his touch almost seemed to make it better, as though he could smoothen the skin back to its original untouched form. What happened? I have problems. I'm sick. He shrugged his shoulders. Your family is good at digging up the things you want to forget, you know? Sakusa gulped. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. I should have never brought you there. I know how they get, and I shouldn't have used you like that. Whoa, hey, you didn't use me. I always do. I always hurt the people I care about. I lie, and you care about me? Sumo. Of course. His heart seemed to lighten and he smiled. It was a small smile accompanied by sadness, but real nonetheless. Come on, I need to get some clothes on, and I'm sure you'd prefer to shower and wear something not bloody. He tried to get up, but faltered a bit, disoriented from the wound and overall utterly exhausted. SakuAtsu noticed and was quick to support him. He guided him to his couch and went to retrieve something from the bags. Next thing he knew, a soft bundle of color hit him in the face, and he laughed as he recognized the pajamas he packed for them. SakuAtsu blushed bright red and quickly fled to the bathroom, leaving Atsumu alone again. He felt a bit bad when he heard a shriek from the bathroom and laughed. He had almost forgotten that the shower was still on the coldest setting. A thought blossomed in his head as he got comfortable on the couch. He wished it could be like this every day, without the horrible parts of their families, just him and SakuAtsu living together. SakuAtsu getting scared of Atsumu's shower settings and drooling over his half-naked body. That'd be nice. He remembered the tea he never finished preparing, and with a little trial and error wobbled toward the kitchen again. When the hot water was poured into the cups, he tended to the counter, making sure to leave it as spotless as before the incident. No trace of blood left. You shouldn't have done that. SakuAtsu took the supplies from his hands, a towel still slung over his shoulder. Did I do it wrong? No, but you need to rest. You got hit in the head. Atsumu's eyes softened as he looked into SakuAtsu's stern ones. I'm okay, it wasn't bad. It looked like you lost half of your blood. I'm surprised you can still stand. Atsumu laughed, even though SakuAtsu looked all but amused. I heard facial wounds always bleed a lot. It's normal. I'm still alive, ain't I? SakuAtsu looked down, putting the supplies aside. I was worried, you know. The whole time, I mean. I thought it was going great, but then... I should have known they would find something. I should have never... Ami, this is not your fault. None of it is. You warned me, and I still accept it. This was my decision, and my decision alone. And if anyone is to blame, it's your father. But besides, I'm kinda glad we did this. After all, I got to hear a confession. Even though it wasn't real. Whatever chance he had to salvage their friendship was probably gone with that, but he had to say it. It was only fair towards SakuAtsu. He had kept it a secret for far too long already. I'm sorry. I guess it was pretty shitty of me to accept the deal and all without you knowing. I'll leave if you want me to. It was real. It was real. SakuAtsu couldn't believe he just said that. His throat tightened and he didn't look up at Atsumu. I'm sorry. I swear I didn't know how I felt about you when I offered you that deal. I swear. I was too coward to confront my feelings for you, but then... And you acted as though you were my boyfriend, and I didn't even need to pretend. I wanted that. I felt bad because it felt like I was using you, like I had put you into that position on purpose, but I swear I didn't.
Atsumu waited patiently for him to finish, his eyes growing wider with every word, and when Sakusa stopped to catch his breath, he carefully reached out a hand to touch his arm, always on the lookout for any sign of rejection. I like it too, you know. Sakusa looked up. His eyes were glossy, and there was a certain disbelief in them that didn't vanish at Atsumu's words. God, Kyo, I don't just like you. I love you. You are amazing and smart, and I just saw how you treat the things and people you care about, and I so desperately wanted to be one of them. Up until today, when it escalated, it wasn't 100% me. I was playing a role to annoy your parents, but I really want to be with you. For real. And not just to pretend. Sakusa could feel the tears assembling in his eyes, and he failed to reply with anything as he choked up on his own words. This couldn't be. It couldn't be serious. You saw the worst of me. I should have helped you earlier. So did you. I doubt that I was graceful when I broke down crying. It's not. You saw my family. Why would you want to stay? Well, for starters, take your parents out of the picture and your family is actually not bad. Great even. I really like your siblings and Kaya is awesome. And aside from that, because you're worth it. There is so much I would do for you, Sakasakiyami. He let his head fall onto the back of the couch and gave him a crooked smile. And Sakusa was speechless for the second time today. This time, however, his heart swelled with joy as silent tears fell from his eyes. Of course, if this is too much, or you want nothing serious like with your best friend back then, I understand. I would be totally up to factors of your parents, though. The Spiker's cheeks turned beet red, and his hands flew up to cover Atsumu's mouth. Don't say such things, Mia, or... He felt an odd tickle on his palm and quickly pulled his hand away. Mia had licked over his palm. Or what? Sakusa looked at him incredulously. The silence stretched, and Atsumu's gaze grew apologetic. Sorry, was that too much? Sakusa didn't reply. Instead, he leaned forward and captured Atsumu's lips in a kiss. It was messy and desperate for validation, desperate to gain any kind of proof that this was real, and not just a dream. Atsumu let out a surprised gasp, and Sakusa jumped at the opportunity to explore his mouth with his tongue, causing Atsumu to moan into the kiss. He regained some control by straightening his back and cupping his cheeks. One hand found its way into the dark curls and pulled him closer at first before gently separating them. Just so that I don't misunderstand, do you want to do me or be with me? Both. Atsumu laughed as his cheeks turned red as well. That's what I'd hoped for. The morning hadn't even set, but Atsumu already found himself awake again. Nightmares had haunted his dreams, and he didn't close his eyes again despite the reassuring warmth next to him. Sakusa was still soundly asleep next to him. For a moment, he took the time to simply admire him. His pale skin appeared milky under the gentle moonlight. It created a stark contrast to the dark curls and moles decorating his skin. Sakasakiyami was without a doubt a piece of art. His defined muscles made him look like one of the carved statues from the antique. Gorgeous and untouchable. Yet that the last part was not a lie proved a series of hickeys littered over his neck and chest, as well as the scratches dragging along his back. If Atsu was completely honest, he wasn't just admiring the artwork that was Sakusa Kiyomi, but also the one he had painted on the canvas that was his skin. The minutes passed, and eventually he got up and walked a little uncertain in his step, a tiny bit less graceful than before, towards the bathroom. As he looked at himself in the mirror, he saw that he had been marked with a similar artwork as Sakusa. Hickeys decorated his neck, chest, and thighs. There were even bite marks hidden within. His fingers hovered over the area, and the memories from a few hours ago flashed through his mind and made him shudder. For the first time in his life, he truly grasped the meaning of "don't judge a book by its cover." He always took pride in his intuition when it came to choosing his partners, both those he had for longer and those who only stayed the night. Yet Kiyomi was a force to be reckoned with he didn't expect. He smiled. However, soon his thoughts drifted into muddy waters again, and his fingers wandered lower, feeling the uneven skin of his scars. Kiyomi hadn't faltered seeing them. He didn't treat them differently, and Atsumu was immensely grateful for that. He didn't want to talk about these, especially not in the moments like that. He didn't even want to be reminded of their existence. Suddenly, there was shuffling echoing from the bedroom, and he could sense a certain unrest filling the air. "Atsu? Tsumu, where?" "I'm here, Kiyomi." The ace looked at him with big, dark eyes that looked as though they could hold the universe itself. "Why did you leave? I thought you left." He looked so vulnerable at this moment that it broke his heart. What damage had this awful family done to him? "I'm sorry. I'm right here. I won't leave." He closed the distance between them and hugged him. Sakusa's head rested against his chest, and he took a few deep breaths to catch himself. "I thought you..." "I know, but I didn't. I had nightmares and couldn't sleep, that's all." The dark-haired's head snapped up, and he looked at him with a piercing gaze. "What nightmares?" "Just bad thoughts, bad memories." "Tsumu." His voice softened, and he reached up to cup his cheeks and caressed the soft skin. "It's okay. I get them sometimes, and today just was exhausting. It reminded me of back then, of constantly being tired, of people doing their best to find my weaknesses and pick me apart until there was nothing left. I thought I was over it. I thought I was stronger. But here I am, falling apart because one person said something mean." He let himself fall back onto the bed beside him. "You are strong. Much stronger than I am. I would have never been able to cut ties with them if it hadn't been for you. They mistreated me for years, but I only realized how bad it had gotten when they hurt someone I cared about so much." Guess that says a lot about how I see myself. He laughed bitterly. "Yeah, I know how that feels." They sat in silence for a moment. It was nice, reassuring. Eventually, Sakusa's hand found Atsumu's and he pulled him closer again. "If you ever feel like that again, tell me. I'm not really good with these kinds of things, but I'll try my best for you." Atsumu smiled. "You are enough. More than enough, Ami."
Atsumu. Hey, Atsumu. What? Is something wrong, Ami? The blonde looked up at him, startled. He blinked a couple of times, his eyes zeroing in on the ace slowly. I should ask you that. He tried not to let the cute tilt of his head distract him. Atsumu had the unbelievable ability to look like a lost puppy when confused. It was painfully adorable and brought Kiyomi time and time again into embarrassing situations. Even worse, inside the confinements of his apartment, he wore no mask to hide behind as a subtle blush slowly tainted his cheeks. Not that Atsumu didn't know by now that he had the tala utterly wrapped around his finger. I'm fine. He turned back to the sink, the tips of his ears turning pink, but there was tension in his expression. He pressed his lips together and worried them between his teeth until Kiyomi could see the faint hint of red appearing. Blood. Atsumu, talk to me. What's wrong? Concerned, he put the towel aside and shifted toward him. Upon closer inspection, the setter looked even more disheveled. He was sweating, and a worried crease appeared between his brows. His hands were trembling slightly. Why do you assume something is wrong? Well, for starters. He gently reached over and took the plate Atsumu was washing from his hands. You have washed this plate for the past 6, almost 7 minutes. Now that's oddly precise. Can't take your eyes off me? The sly smirk appeared on the blonde's face, causing SakuAtsu's eyes to soften. He loved the smirk. It was infuriating. It managed to make his blood boil every time, but it was so Atsumu. He wouldn't want to have it any other way. If I say yes, what do I get in return? He leaned in a little, teasing. Atsumo's breath staggered a bit. Perhaps you could tell me what's on your mind? Ami, not fair. The ace chuckled, dried his hands off and wrapped his arms around Atsumu, pulling him closer. He kissed his cheeks tenderly, where a subtle blush started to blossom. Please, Atsumu. I want to know what's bothering you so that I can help, just like you always do for me. The blonde sighed and gently loosened the embrace. He too dried his hands and quickly cleared the counter. When he spoke again, he didn't look at him. I just don't want you to take it the wrong way. His heart seemed to stutter and he had to remind himself to breathe. It was hard not to jump to conclusions when the warm, reassuring eyes so stoically refused to face him, but he had to stay calm for Atsumu. Stay calm. See? That's what I mean. He kept SakuAtsu's cheeks. You worry too much, and there really is no good way to address this. No, please. I want to know what you're thinking, even if you decide that Don't you even dare finish that sentence. He looked at him sternly. A small sigh echoed through the room, but when Atsumu looked up again, he smiled softly. You're such a pessimist. You know that, right? So I've been told. It was a little hard to speak with Atsumu squishing his face together. It must have been an increasingly odd sight because the setter laughed and finally let go of him. He followed him to the couch and they snuggled up together before Atsumu started to speak again. He seemed more comfortable being close, but still, his gaze stayed focused on something in the distance Kiyomi couldn't see. I've just been thinking. Tomorrow, the break will be over. The next season is about to start and we gotta return to practice. That's how it goes. I thought you'd be excited though. I mean, you missed them, right?
Of course. I'm sure Sho has a bunch of stories, and Bo probably won't shut up about meeting Akashi again. It's just... things are different now.
How's that? As far as I can tell, you're still the same idiot as before. Atsumu scoffed.
Rude.
A chuckle resonated in Sakusa's chest. He knew what the setter was referring to, but the thought made him nervous. Do you want to tell them? About us?
No.
There it was. His chest tightened slightly, though he knew he shouldn't have gotten his hopes up. The way Mia was bashing through all his walls was dangerous, but every attempt to stop him was futile, and after a month all he did was watch the destruction with fascination, and a newfound spark of passion ignited in his heart. Who would have thought he could get burned so quickly? Please, don't get me wrong, I like you. More than that. He sat up. Finally, this piercing gold looked back at him. It was so much warmer than everything he'd ever known. Too warm, perhaps. Kiyomi, please don't look at me like that. Confused, his brows pinched together. Like what?
Like you expect me to pack up and leave.
Are you not? The setter's eyes widened and he froze. Suddenly, the gold got covered by a thin veil of tears and Sakusa gulped in shock. Atsu.
Of course not. Why would you even think that? I love you, Kiyomi. I want to be with you. Why would you just... You... Don't just accept this as if it was obvious.
It rattled him to the bone, seeing Atsumu so infuriated at his indifference, yet it hurt much more to see him so distressed. Hey, Atsu, it's alright. I'm fine.
No, that's not fine. Don't prepare for me to leave just like that, because I won't. I won't. Not unless you tell me to.
He got quieter toward the end, and it broke his heart. Okay, but I won't. Please stay. He tugged at his hand, and without another word, the setter flung himself back into his arms. I'm sorry. I don't want this to fail. His words were muffled by Kiyomi's shirt as he held him close. I get attached to people easily. I hyper-focus on them, and sometimes I come on too strong and rush into things. Plus, in recent years, I felt like... Sakusa felt his own throat tightening as he heard the strain in Atsumu's voice. He couldn't decipher the reason for his sorrow, yet desperately wished he could take it from him. Like what? Like the people I've been with valued my reputation more than, well, me. Like they would only be with me long enough to earn bragging rights, or, you know. He didn't, but he also didn't feel like he should press the issue. Instead, he pulled the setter closer, stroking across his back soothingly. It's okay. We'll go at your pace. But you... I got scared for a second. But I don't need a public speech to be sure. Your reassurance is enough. I believe you. He heard a soft sniffle echoing from where Atsumu hit against his neck, and his heart clenched. Thanks. Of course. Atsumu was still tense when they walked to the gym. He was visibly uncomfortable and continued to throw unsure glances at the ace. Sakusa in return didn't know what to say to reassure him that he didn't mind. He wouldn't leave because of something like that.
All he needed to know was that Atsumu wanted to be with him, and if the only proof for that were his whispered words in the safety of their home, that was fine.
For now.
He took him aside just before entering the gym, repeating himself for the upteenth time, and Atsumu nodded slowly. Something was off, and Sakusa wasn't sure it just stemmed from his insecurities. His eyes were slightly glossy, and his cheeks still bestowed with a warm blush. But before he could ask further, Atsumu saw Hinata approaching from afar, and they proceeded inside, now separate. He'd have to ask him again after practice. Today, training was oddly silent. Sure, Bokutsu and Hinata were their loud and energetic selves, but it wasn't the same without Atsumu's input. The setter was playing well as usual, but his movements were mechanic and practiced, far from his usual style. At moments he wondered if he was even aware of what happened around him. He didn't seem present. Sakusa gulped, the worry he couldn't shake off since this morning more prominent than before. Was this his fault? Because he reacted so poorly, or was this whole thing a general bad idea? What if the abilities on the court would suffer from the relationship? Of course, he wasn't the only one who noticed. Despite the blonde's forced smile and faint enthusiasm, they had barely finished the first set when Mian pulled him aside.
Sakusa, do you know by any chance what is going on with Atsumu? He insists he's fine, but
he wasn't. That much was obvious. Still, Sakusa shook his head. It wasn't a complete lie. He had a hunch, was sure that it was something he did wrong, but what, he didn't know. And he'd respect Atsumu's wishes to keep the relationship secret.
I don't know. Why are you asking me that? You care about him, and Atsumu cares about you, so I thought maybe you knew more than us. Thanks regardless.
It left Sakusa a little stunned, and he had to do a double take to make sure he understood him correctly. Was it that obvious? They weren't even together the last time they were with the team. He hadn't even realized how he felt about Atsumu. All they did was fight. Hey, Tsum Tsum! You sure you're good to go for the next set? You look pretty pale. Are you kidding me, Bokan? Of course I'm ready. Just you wait. Me and the prickly spiker over there will kick your ass this time. They laughed, and Sakusa didn't need to turn around to know that Atsumu meant him. He vaguely suppressed the urge to smile at his comment and force his face into a scowl. This was more like him. The next set they'd play together, and he would make sure he'd hit every one of Atsumu's sets perfectly. The game went great, and Kiyomi felt more and more at ease as it progressed, and Atsumu used his playful and risky attacks again, utilizing him from every corner of the court. His style was aggressive and unpredictable, leaving the other half of their team just as exhausted as him as they tried to chase after his volatile play. His muscles strained, and slowly Sakusa could feel the tiredness kicking in, but he embraced it. This meant Atsumu was finally back as the setter he was. It wasn't until the end of the set that Atsumu's struggles resurfaced. For the blink of an eye, his expression twisted into one of pain. It startled him. But when he looked closer, it was gone. A quick glance around showed that no one had noticed but him. Was he getting delusional? Did his worry cloud his judgment? Part of him wanted to end the set right there to assure himself that Atsumu was okay, but the smile now plastered on the setter's face stopped him. Perhaps it was really nothing, in which case wouldn't it be much worse to make a fuss about it and potentially expose them as partners? He'd ask him after the set, but he had to ask. Shoyo! He watched the flash of orange strike forward and moved his own position and sink, adjusting his stance on the court when suddenly the dull thud of the ball hitting the ground echoed through the room. Atsumu's set missed. His eyes darted to the setter, noticing his labored breathing and glassy eyes. He turned toward them to apologize when suddenly his gaze became unfocused and he wavered. Sakusa was in motion before his brain could truly understand the action. He dashed to Atsumu's side and caught him before he could fall, but it didn't stop him from bringing both of them to the ground. Tsumu? He propped his head up against his chest, watching his expression carefully and shaking him gently. The setter's skin was pale and glistening with sweat. His eyes were red-rimmed, and upon closer inspection, he was hot to the touch. He looked sick. Atsumu! The noises around them swelled into a panicked mess, only kept at bay by Mian and the coach, who quickly made his way to Atsumu and Sakusa. Is he awake? Sakusa shook his head, a sudden lump in his throat taking his voice away. Did he hit his head, while falling or before? No. Okay, let's carry him to the benches. Can someone bring him a water bottle, please? Immediately, Hinata jumped into action while Sakusa lifted the blonde into his arms and carried him to the nearest bench as the coach instructed. He placed him down gently and batted his head in his lap as he settled down by his side. Gently, his fingertips traced the shape of his face, and he brushed strands of sweaty blonde hair from his forehead. It was so warm. He couldn't believe he didn't notice sooner. When Hinata reached them with the bottle, Atsumu wasn't awake yet to accept it, but Sakusa took it and damped one of the towels a bit before patting down the setter's forehead carefully. How could he allow this to happen? They had spent so much time together recently. Hadn't he been careful enough? He didn't feel sick, but there was still the possibility that he brought it into Atsumu's home, on his clothes or breath. How could it be that he failed to protect him? He'd make up for it. Almost tenderly, he wiped the sweat from Atsumu's face and neck and put little bits of fresh, cool water on the towel periodically to help him cool down from the fever. He wished they were home right now, that they would have never left for training this morning, so that he could draw him a hot bath right now and care for him adequately. I don't know what's more unsettling, the fact that Atsumu fainted so suddenly, or Sakusa looking at him like that. Thomas nodded slowly. He's obviously sick, yet Sakusa looks so gentle. Who knows? Maybe he's sick too. Lovesick. Hinata grinned wildly at his stupid joke, yet no one reacted, still too encaptured by this odd display of affection between their teammates. Kyo? Ami? Hey. Relief spread within Sakusa's chest, and he smiled softly at the other. Atsumu seemed to have forgotten where they were because he simply smiled back and snuggled closer to the ace. It warmed his heart to see that he sought his company even when vulnerable, and he would have loved to indulge him, but that had to wait until they came home. Gently he coaxed him into a sitting position and offered the water Hinata brought. Here, drink something first, then we can bring you home to rest. Atsumu's brows pinched together in confusion before realization dawned on his face, and his cheeks took a worryingly dark shade of red. No reason to be embarrassed, Sumi-kun. You just almost face-planted on the ground. Bokuto laughed. Yeah, go home. And let your boyfriend take care of you. Sakusa stilled. He knew that he hadn't been subtle in his care and that this was utterly out of the ordinary for him. But still, they jumped to conclusions faster than expected. He didn't look at Atsumu as the coach approached him again. How are you feeling, Atsumu? a bit better, but...
I know, you should go home.
Sorry for acting recklessly. I truly didn't think it was that bad.
Well, just do better next time. Now, do you think you can manage going home on your own?
Cold shivers hunted down Sakusa's spine at the suggestion.
I'll bring him home.
He had expected to have to fight Atsumu on this, but the setter remained quiet and only nodded as the coach asked for his approval. The whole way home, they didn't exchange another word, and it was nerve-wracking. He made sure to support Atsumu so that he wouldn't faint again, but otherwise kept his distance, certain that the other was still mad at him and didn't want him close. Even once home, no words were spoken. Atsumu looked barely present until suddenly his eyes widened in shock. Kiyomi, what are we doing here? The sound of his name caused his heart to speed up. He couldn't be too mad if he still referred to him by his given name.
What do you mean? I brought you home so you could rest.
Yeah, sure, but this is your home.
Oh.
Perhaps he was wrong. He knew that they had only been together for a relatively short while, but ever since Atsumu had spent so much time here, he had become accustomed to his presence. Still, it was foolish to think Atsumu would harbor the same attachment.
It was closer, and here I can take care of you better. I know where everything is, and I'm always...
Stop that. He flinched, drawing back further.
Sorry.
No, that too. He struggled for the right words, where Sakusa racked his brain for a way that could make this easier for him.
Atsumu, I know that you are mad at me. I get it, I messed up. But please, let me make it up to you.
Mad at you?
He hissed, looking at the ace, and this time the raven recognized what he had been looking for ever since this morning. In Atsumu's eyes burned rage.
Mad at you? Why do you say such things? You always spout such nonsense. I can't with you. You... He let out a pained cry and leaned against the wall.
Sit down first.
No. Why are you like this? Why don't you get mad at me as you used to? Why do you say all that? As quickly as the seething anger had run hot through his system, setting his nerves ablaze, as quickly did it pass. His voice faded and he sounded almost broken toward the end.
I don't understand. Atsumu, don't be stupid. Sit down before you faint again.
He noticed the waver in his stance and rushed closer to catch him again if necessary. A bittersweet laugh echoed from the blonde at his words.
Yeah, that's better. What, you like me more when I'm an asshole?
He tried to harness his annoyance, fueled by confusion and frustration, but every time he thought he'd finally figured out the setter, he surprised him anew. I like ya better if ya don't talk shit about yourself and look at me like a lost puppy I kicked out on the streets. His voice was still bitter, but he wasn't yelling at him anymore, and Sakusa didn't know whether it was the lack of energy or if he had never meant to yell in the first place.
I never...
It was implied. Ya think I'll leave you the first chance I got? Well, newsflash, I won't. You think I'd get mad at you for the most arbitrary and minuscule things? Well, I won't do that either. I'm only mad because you're being such a dick to yourself. Sakusa stared at him for a long moment, unsure what to reply or if there was even any plausible answer to this other than...
You're right.
I know I'm a major hypocrite and jerk about this, but this doesn't mean that... Wait, what did you just say?
You're right. I'm not good at being kind to myself. I'm working on it, but I relapsed. I'm sorry that it affected you.
This time, it was Atsumo's turn to stare. He blinked slowly, clearly perplexed.
What? Cat got your tongue?
He tilted his head slightly, teasing.
Atsumo gulped.
Usually, people don't just admit that. I wouldn't have.
Well, I'm not doing this since yesterday. I might only have been able to sever ties with my family recently, but I've worked years to undo the damage they caused. Still, not quite there though.
His gaze darkened and he looked down at the ground, disappointed. I'm proud of you. His head snapped up.
What?
I'm proud of you. I mean, this whole thing sucks. You shouldn't be the one who has to make up for their mistakes, but that's life for you. Stupid shit. Still, you're better at it than I am. I mean, look at me. He laughed and clearly meant it as a joke, but SakuAtsu didn't share that sentiment. He closed the distance between them and led Atsumo, despite protest, toward the couch to lay down.
Perhaps you're right. At least I'll assume you are, if you continue to act like a baby about it.
Mean? Also, to my defense, I truly thought it was mostly nerves because I was worried ever since your reaction yesterday about not telling them and all.
SakuAtsu stiffened again, his hands digging into the blanket he got for Atsumo. Yeah, I guess that failed. I'm sorry. I should have been more subtle, but all I could think about at the moment was that I had to make sure you are alright.
Aw, don't tell me, Ami. Do you have a crush on me? Whatever moment of sincerity they had was ruined in an instant.
You are such an arrogant idiot, Mia.
He shrugged his shoulders. So what? Better being the idiot than the one being in love with the idiot. Do tell, Ami, what does this say about you and your judgment of character?
Obviously, I must be a masochist.
He deadpanned, but Atsumo burst out laughing. A small smile played around SakuAtsu's lips until suddenly the laugh turned into a cough, increasing in severity. He patted Atsumo's back soothingly, the sweat drenching his shirt, reminding him again that the other suffered a fever.
I draw you a bath. You need to sweat out the fever. Afterward, I'll make you some tea and you can rest. Sleep a little if possible, and...
Why are you... I mean, doesn't this make you uncomfortable? SakuAtsu contemplated that for a moment, a little surprised himself that he wasn't keeping 3 meters apart at all times.
Yes, it does. I don't like to see you suffer, and the sickness makes me nervous. However, you spent so much time here recently, it feels like I failed to protect you.
The setter giggled again.
You're silly, protecting me from germs.
He laughed, and somehow it made SakuAtsu feel warm. He loves that sound.
You will, however, take the guest bedroom. I will take care of you, but only if you follow my instructions.
Of course, Nurse Ami. I'll be a willing patient.
He rolled his eyes at that, having the slight suspicion that Atsumo would, despite his words, be quite the challenging patient to deal with. So... what, Mia?
Hey! Atsumu pouted, and if he hadn't still been fighting a headache, might have tried to lunge a pillow at his boyfriend. It was day 3 of him fighting off this stupid sickness, and he was slowly but surely getting fed up with laying in bed all day. The only good news was that today was their day off, so SakuAtsu could keep him company. If only while keeping 3 meters apart and with a mask on, but that was better than nothing. I'm your boyfriend. Don't call me Mia, that's weird. An exasperated sigh echoed from the other end of the room. SakuAtsu didn't dignify his comment with a response. Kiyomi, I'm bored. Not my problem. You're so cold. Oh, he would definitely get him back for this when he got out of here. Hey, you're staying in bed until this is over. SakuAtsu was about to tuck him back in, and Atsumu was tempted to let it happen, if only to feel his touch, but decided against it. No reason to cause his boyfriend any more trouble or make him uncomfortable. I was just turning around, so I didn't have to see my boyfriend when he's being so mean. He scoffed. There was no real heat behind his words, but he was a little offended. A tiny bit. SakuAtsu sighed again. It was followed by steps, and to Atsumu's surprise, he could feel the weight of the mattress shift. Okay, what do you want to do? His head turned around abruptly, and he was met with the dark, gentle eyes of his beloved. Even with the mask on, Atsumu knew he was smiling beneath it. He grinned, and immediately a worried frown appeared on the ace's face. Nothing that would require you to get out of bed. Aw, you're such a killjoy. The raven simply quirked his brow at him, but didn't comment further. Atsumu thought about it, until suddenly his face lit up with an idea, undoubtedly causing SakuAtsu to regret his decision. Let's play 20 questions. Something like a chuckle escaped SakuAtsu's lips before he caught himself. Fine. You start. He seemed to think about it for a moment while Atsumu waited in anticipation. What's your favorite color? That's so basic. The ace just scowled at him. Then you shouldn't have a problem answering it. Fine. He thought about it and found it was actually much harder than he thought. That was until them eyes met again, and before he could stop himself. Black. 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 It's a nice color. Technically, it isn't even a color at all. Oh, you know what I mean. SakuAtsu rolled his eyes, but there was a spark of curiosity lingering in them. Why black? Heat rapidly rushed up Atsumu's cheeks, and he hoped that SakuAtsu would blame it on the fever he'd been fighting these past days, while he averted his gaze. Nuh-uh. My turn. Another sigh. Atsumu noticed that he did that a lot today, but he relented and waited. Atsumu's thoughts were rushed, and he tried to come up with a question quickly. Why volleyball? I know they ask you that a lot in interviews, with you doing college first and everything, but I never felt like your answer was genuine. He still looked away as the mattress shifted again, but when SakuAtsu answered, he couldn't help but wish to see his face. searching for the hidden truth as he did so many times before with this question. The ace leaned against the headboard and looked into the distance.
Well, it wasn't a lie.
Atsumu frowned, a little disappointed.
But it wasn't the whole truth either. Yes, I mainly choose volleyball because, well, I'm good at it. It's fun.
He could see the smile playing around his eyes, and it warmed his heart as he heard him talk about it with genuine passion.
When Motia first dragged me to the volleyball club, I thought I would hate it. My parents probably did too, or they wouldn't have let it happen. But I didn't. I fell in love with it.
The same way you fell in love with me.
Yes, you dork.
Hey. He couldn't be mad at him. Not when the deep, comforting chuckle resonated in his chest that always made Atsumu's heart skip a beat.
It was really similar, actually.
Surprised, he shut up and listened closely while SakuAtsu explained.
I liked volleyball from the first day I played, but I wouldn't admit it because that would mean admitting Motia was right. But then my parents expressed how much they disliked it, so I leaned into it, just to spite them.
You date me despite your parents?
It was a catalyst.
He looked at Atsumu, his gaze turning soft.
And just like volleyball, turns out that I love you. Honestly, I'm not sure when I'd have been able to admit this to myself without the fake dating disaster.
Suddenly, a shadow crept over his face and he lowered his head a little.
I could have lost you to someone else.
But you didn't. Helps that I was already madly in love with you. He chuckled.
Since when?
Nah, that's too embarrassing.
It's my turn, so since when?
Atsumu groans, only now realizing how this could have been turned around on him. This was a bad choice. Would you believe me if I said a couple of months?
Since you said it's embarrassing, no.
Fine. He fumbled with the corner of his blanket while struggling for an answer. I guess I kinda always had a crush on you, like since high school. To my defense, you were insanely hot even back then. I was just a teenager, so what did you expect me to feel?
Mia, stop. I don't need to hear about your teenage fantasies.
Well, we are adults now, so we could... He smirked at him, but SakuAtsu shut him down rather quickly with a glare.
You're still sick, so don't even think about it.
Is that a maybe?
It's a not now.
Now that was surprising. Certainly something he'd keep in mind. Anyway, that was, as you can imagine, mostly sexual and aesthetic attraction. Not that we ever talked enough to explore any other kind of attraction.
We didn't talk a lot when I got to MSBY either. True, but I got to see you a lot more. Not just at training. I knew and loved your passion for the sport already, but now there was more. The PR team forced you to interviews and boycotted Mia and dragged you out to some team outings. You looked miserable. He laughed. I think it was at night at the bar we celebrated our victory in the practice match against the Adlers, remember? I remember you all getting shit-faced. I'm surprised that you still remember. Fair point, I guess. Anyway, Shoyo got utterly wasted, just because we defeated Kageyama in a practice match. At some point he basically collapsed onto your side and you let him. You let him use you as support for at least 20 minutes and then called Kageyama from his phone to make sure he gets home safely. That was so sweet of you. Well, as much as I hate it, it seems genuinely impossible to be mean to Hinata-kun. Aw, aren't you a big softie? Sakusa raised an eyebrow at him and the game proceeded. Around question 6, Sakusa hit him unprepared after Atsumu had teased him with a particularly spicy question. So why is your favorite color black? Jeez, I thought you had forgotten about that. With the way you blushed? Never. Shut up. Are you going to answer, or… Yes. He agreed, but that didn't stop him from hesitating. Well, it's the color of a team. And it was the color of Inarizaki too. Sakusa stared at him expectantly. What? I'm waiting. I already told you. That wouldn't make you blush like that. Sad blush was just now flaring up again and Atsumu powdered while crossing his arms. Curse you and your stupid eyes. What was that? It's your eye color, okay? Sakusa chuckled. Who's basic now? Oh, shut up. It's romantic, okay? If you say so. What happened between you and Ushijima? What? It's my turn, so what happened? You said Ayuka and Kumori know not to mention him, so… He got quieter toward the end, only now realizing the utter shock that was written over Sakusa's face. Ami? He hadn't even considered that it was something bad. He was just curious. I'm sorry. You don't have to… No, it's fine. It was a long time ago. Oh. It was all he could muster as he observed the spiker hesitantly. Sakusa had averted the dark eyes Atsumu loved so much as he started to explain. He was my best friend. After Motoya, that is. The only friend I wasn't related to. I didn't have many. The one that caught… the one you went to after your parents kicked you out? He nodded slowly, and Atsumu could feel his stomach twisting into knots. Seemingly subconsciously, Sakusa pulled his knees to his chest as he continued. Though I wasn't quite honest. He wasn't the one who caught feelings. I did. I hated it because I knew it wouldn't work out. I hated him even more because he was willing to try. He was always so considerate and kind. The setter's head spun. None of those were words he'd used to describe the tall ace, but Saku's eyes reflected such sincerity and admiration when he talked about him, and an old, honest pain. Why hate him for that? Because it made it so much harder to dislike him. He was still confused, and Sakusa must have noticed because he continued with a sigh. You know how Tendo and him are a thing now? They are? God, you're blind. He huffed, offended. Yes, they are. They don't make a big deal out of it in public, but they have been dating for years. Wakatoshi even plans to propose soon. Oh, wow. The thing is, they are one of these typical fairy tale couples that shouldn't exist in reality. Atsumu added that to the list of things he would have never thought someone say about Ushijima or his boyfriend for that matter, but hey, here they are. How so? They're just made for each other. They have been in love since high school, even though it took Wakatoshi quite a while to notice. But you did. Yeah. It was the way he looked at him. The way Tendo could make him smile. The pop culture references he'd endure for him. He did that with me too, but it was different. With Saturday, he seemed so genuinely interested. Wakatoshi is selfless. Too selfless for his own good sometimes, and he would have tried for me, but I didn't want that for him, so I tried to hate him. A long silence stretched in the room. After that, Atsumu couldn't help but be speechless. That's... wow. That must feel awful. Sakusa looked a little surprised, but nodded slowly. I'm kinda glad we weren't closer in high school. I might have blown my chances with you if we tried anything back then. I was really bitter. Well, I guess it didn't change you that much that— ow! Sakusa flicked his forehead. I was kidding. He knew the other wasn't mad when he heard the soft chuckle from his side. Again, his heart skipped a beat and he couldn't help but admire him. The silence that followed was comfortable and quickly cut short as a realization kicked in. Wait, you slept with Ushijima? Sakusa looked at him unimpressed, while Atsumu was positively losing his mind. Yes. Don't say it like that was obvious. How does it even Seriously? I thought after I made you scream my name, you knew that much at least. Shut up. You know what I mean. Well, I think almost anyone would bottom for Ushijima. You have seen his spikes, didn't you? That broke him. His brain went haywire in an attempt to process the information. Nope. I'm not even going to imagine that. Since when are you so shy, Mia? Sakusa teased him while Atsumu desperately tried to get the images out of his head. Maybe since my boyfriend talks about his and his ex's sex life. You asked. Atsumu made an unintelligent noise of protest. If you want to put those thighs to good use, I might just let you top next time, if that's your question. He smirked at him, and Atsumu swore he must have died. Only after you're completely healthy again, though. This was a side of Sakusa he had never seen before, nor did he even expect the uptight spiker to have a side like this. And he wasn't sure he could survive this. Sakusa teasing him was a whole new level of lethal. That concludes the SuperCut with its bonus part. I hope you liked it. I'm kind of sad that this series is ending here, but yeah, if you liked it, leave a like, leave a comment. It would really help me out and tell me which part was your favorite, if you have a favorite quote of the overall series, and especially also if you like this bonus part, since that's the new material. Tell me also what other series I should make into a SuperCut. A special thanks as always goes to my nerdy neckos. I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you so much for your continued support. Here are my other social medias, though I'm most active here, and if you want to support me, you can either click the join button under the this video, check out my merch, or check out these other videos in the end card. I hope you like it. Enjoy. Great day. Have a great.
Some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you want to be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up.